One day, out of absolutely nowhere, a massive tower suddenly popped up right in the middle of the city, marking the beginning of the end of the world. Humanity went into absolute panic, calling it the apocalypse. This guy is Jaehwan. Before the apocalypse, he was just an ordinary guy, scraping by at the bottom of society. He started climbing the tower way later than everyone else. Because of that, he had absolutely zero cheat codes like hidden skills or hidden classes. So, he decided to completely ignore all those useless things and went all in on a single move, the basic thrust. Through pure, relentless effort, he pushed his limits and managed to slay over 50 monsters all on his own. His teammates thought his skills would never amount to much, but over time, his dedication paid off. His strikes became incredibly fast and precise, eventually breaking past the limits of normal human movement, delivering attacks that easily rivaled high-tier hidden skills. On his journey of slaying monsters and grinding levels, Jaehwan met true friends and formed humanity's final suicide squad, Carpe Diem. Once they reached the 77th floor, the climbers discovered the regression stone. This stone had the power to send someone back in time to the moment they were first summoned, keeping all of their memories intact. By crushing the regression stone, a user could travel back to the past, but they would end up in a parallel universe completely separate from their current timeline. Because of this, there was no guarantee that everyone who used the stone would ever see each other again in the same world. Around that time, the second tower shockwave hit the outside world, bringing humanity to the very brink of extinction. Facing certain death, the climbers were forced to make a choice. Desperate, many of them used their regression stones to flee to the past, leaving this trash fire of a world behind. But Jaehwan's team, Carpe Diem, refused to succumb to the temptation. They chose to stay and fight to their very last breath. They climbed higher and higher, enduring endless hardships, until they finally set foot on the 98th floor. Jaehwan hoped everything would go smoothly from there, but the monster guarding the 98th purgatory floor was an absolute nightmare. Spewing lava that melted their weapons, it wiped out nearly his entire team. Sent flying 8 meters by a brutal headbutt, he slammed into the wall, coughing up blood. Despair began to creep in. He stared at his fallen comrades. They had survived so much together. Were they really going to die like dogs now? No way. He could not accept this. Yunhwan, Jaehwan's best friend, swung his sword at the beast to draw its attention away from him. Yunhwan screamed, "Hang in there! You can't take this monster down alone." The beast glared at him, spun around, and drove its massive horn right through Yunhwan's chest. To make matters worse, it violently slammed him against the rocky ground. Unable to watch his friend suffer, Jaehwan charged forward to fight the monster head-on. Right then, Jaehwan noticed a strange white light connecting his sword path directly to the monster. Without hesitation, he lunged and pierced the exact spot indicated by the light. The beast shattered into pieces, unable to regenerate. Leaning against a rock, Yunhwan coughed up blood, which kept pouring from his wounds. Jaehwan noticed a regression stone gripped tightly in his friend's hand. Yunhwan looked up at him and whispered, "I'm sorry." Yunhwan was always the cheerful one. Even in a cruel, miserable place like this tower, he never stopped smiling. That's why the other climbers nicknamed him the Smile Knight. For the first time, Jaehwan saw the Smile Knight lose his smile. Unable to look at him, Jaehwan turned his back and growled, "Just get lost." He walked away without looking back. Yunhwan let out a bitter smile. The stone in his hand was not a regression stone at all. It was just a common, ugly rock. But deep down, Jaehwan probably already knew that. Dragging his heavy steps, Yunhwan climbed the stairs, sat on the ledge of the tower window, leaned back, and plummeted. In his final moments, he felt truly lucky that this world had someone like Jaehwan in it. Standing before the door to the 99th floor, Jaehwan thought of his fallen friends, steeling his resolve as he stepped forward. The door opened, revealing a vast, blinding field of white snow. Heavy breathing, Jaehwan narrowly dodged an attack from the 99th floor boss, the frost dragon, Velkisus. After a brutal exchange, Jaehwan realized he was outmatched. This dragon was massive, incredibly powerful, and kept talking trash to break his spirit. Frozen half-stiff, Jaehwan retreated into an ice cave to recover and heal. While the frost dragon kept circling outside, Jaehwan bit down hard on a piece of cloth and poured healing fluid over his frostbitten limbs. It had already been 15 years since he first reached the 99th floor. Although he had faced thousands of dangers on the 98th floor, the sheer threat level of the 99th was on a completely different level. Jaehwan gritted his teeth to stay absolutely silent. Outside, the frost dragon continued to blast its icy breath, a coldness pulled straight from a forgotten land. Even with his frost resistance maxed out, it was still almost impossible to endure. If it weren't for the leftover gear abandoned by the climbers who had quit, Jaehwan would have kicked the bucket a long time ago. He pulled out his remaining supplies, quietly counting them one by one. There was the dragon sword he scavenged on the 85th floor, the ice armor Yunhuan had given him, and the Fire King bracelet of Han Soyul, the girl who had passed away. Jaehwan gripped the bracelet tightly, endlessly whispering his apologies. Memories of the day she died flashed vividly through his mind. Jaehwan's thoughts drifted back to his conversation with Jae, the blacksmith of Atopos. The village of Atopos had finally rebuilt itself after they defeated the boss on the 50th floor. Even though dead bodies and wounded tower walkers were brought back every single day, the people never once lost hope. Priests constantly formed emergency rescue teams to quickly tend to the soldiers who were no longer able to fight. And in their workshops, blacksmiths worked tirelessly to forge new gear for the tower walkers, ready to give everything they had for the survival of humanity. Jae was probably the very last blacksmith left in Atopos now, because there was barely any of humanity left alive inside the tower. Jaehwan didn't even know what year it was anymore. Over 10 massive shocks had occurred. At some point, humans stopped being summoned to climb the tower. Practically all of humanity had been wiped out. Just 2 days ago, old Hiron disappeared. Humans didn't age while inside the tower. If someone suddenly vanished from the tower, it could only mean one of two things. They either returned to the past, or they jumped off. Hiron from the apothecary and Jae the blacksmith were among the very few supporters left. Jae stared sorrowfully at the glowing red iron. Jaehwan asked him to teach him how to forge. Back to the present, Jaehwan quickly forged himself a new sword, ready to face the frost dragon once again. The frost dragon spoke. Since the creation of this tower, not a single human has ever made it to the 99th floor alone. It acknowledged Jaehwan as an impressive human. Jaehwan let out a dry laugh. How ironic. The last one to acknowledge him wasn't a fellow human, but a monster. Gripping his sword, Jaehwan charged forward again, only to end up getting absolutely battered, covered in blood from head to toe. The frost dragon thought this human was incredibly stubborn. No matter how hard he tried, the only thing waiting for him at the end was overwhelming solitude and his own arrogance. Jaehwan didn't even hear what the dragon was saying. Its voice was just background noise, like a dog barking in his ears. Jaehwan shattered the ice blocks controlled by the frost dragon and charged forward again. He refused to give up. A Chinese master once said, "Do not fear the one who knows 100 techniques, but fear the one who has practiced a single technique 100 times." Jaehwan was exactly that kind of person. He didn't have any flashy, special skills. His only move was a single, concentrated thrust. This time was no different, he kept using his thrust. But even after striking hundreds of times, all he got in return was a tiny scratch on the frost dragon. Just as the frost dragon opened its jaws to spit another breath, Jaehwan spotted that strange white light again, just like before. Without a moment's hesitation, he gripped his sword tightly and lunged straight toward the gathering light. The frost dragon's jaw was completely shattered, leaving its tongue hanging limply out of its mouth. Furious beyond belief, the dragon spread its wings and flew up to charge another attack, ready to spit ice everywhere. Jaehwan rolled on the ground, desperately dodging its icy spit, but he couldn't dodge forever. Completely exhausted, he collapsed to the ground, panting heavily. The frost dragon began to mock him again, claiming that it would take at least 10 people like Jaehwan to even stand a chance of defeating it. Then, the frost dragon let a crucial piece of information slip. If humanity's journey hadn't been manipulated by the Nightmare Stone, your destiny would have been entirely different. What a tragedy. Jaehwan froze. He stared wide-eyed at the frost dragon and demanded, "What the hell is the Nightmare Stone?" But the dragon didn't answer, stomping its massive foot down toward him instead. Fortunately, Jaehwan quickly used Flash Step to get out of there. He slipped through the door and slammed it shut, barely escaping with his life. If those claws had grazed him even slightly, it would have been game over. Thinking about the Nightmare Stone the dragon had mentioned, Jaehwan fell silent, determined never to give up. 5 years later, he returned and successfully took down the frost dragon. The system notified him that he had defeated the boss of the 99th floor, and all of his stats had reached their absolute maximum. Sitting on the head of the dying frost dragon, Jaehwan sighed as he swiped away the notifications one by one. He looked down and asked the frost dragon about the Nightmare Stone. The dragon was on the verge of death but had no intention of explaining. It simply told Jaehwan that all his questions would be answered on the final floor. Slowly, the frost dragon dissolved into particles of light and transformed into a sword. Jaehwan picked up the loot and put it in his bag. As the dragon faded away, a dark portal appeared, leading to the final floor, the 100th floor. Without hesitation, Jaehwan stepped right through. In front of him, a row of screens displayed views from the lower floors of the tower. Suddenly, a voice echoed out, admitting it hadn't expected Jaehwan to barge straight in here. "I thought you would head back to the village first." It told Jaehwan not to be so tense, and to give it just a moment. A system notification popped up, congratulating Jaehwan on being the first person to clear all the tutorial games of the 294th world. Your impressive achievement has been permanently recorded in the immortal Akashic records. The recorded process was only permitted, viewed by the monarch of the great land. Jaehwan's eyes went wide as he stared at the notification. What the actual hell? Right before him, countless corpses were sinking into the deep water. Suddenly, a bizarre creature stepped out from the depths. It was massive, with the body of a man and the head of a beast, dressed in a sharp, elegant suit. It looked Jaehwan up and down, remarking that he had recovered much faster than expected. Jaehwan demanded to know who he was. The monster swayed playfully and introduced himself as the demon Beastlane. He couldn't believe Jaehwan had actually climbed all the way to the 100th floor on his own. Something like this had never happened before. Beastlane was the actual master of this terrifying tower. Jaehwan frowned at the monster. According to the notification from earlier, everything they had gone through so far was just a tutorial, meaning the real game had not even begun. Beastlane praised him for being so quick on the uptake. He snapped his fingers, projecting a series of past events right before Jaehwan. Watching them, Beastlane mused, "So much has happened. What a dramatic show." He asked if Jaehwan remembered it all now, the pain, the anger, the regret. Beastlane just kept rambling on and on. He promised to grant Jaehwan a brand new chance, tempting him to start the game all over again. Beastlane leaned in close, whispering in his ear, "Starting your life over is something that only happens in novels, you know." He argued that for a mere human like Jaehwan, getting the chance to redo everything from scratch while keeping his memories was an absolute steal. Jaehwan's eyes widened as his mind began to spin. This wasn't the end? Wasn't he supposed to save the world after reaching the very top of the tower? What the hell was actually going on here? Jaehwan suddenly realized that he had been played by this demon from the very beginning. There was never a way to stop the tower earthquakes, and the only thing they could do was keep climbing and conquering the tower. But saving the world was nothing more than a pipe dream. Jaehwan took a deep breath, looked Beastlane dead in the eye, and said, "I am never going back to the past." Beastlane burst into a mocking, hysterical laughter. "Are you really still talking about the past?" he sneered. Beastlane looked down his nose at him, spelling out the cold, hard truth. There was absolutely no item in this tower, or even in the Great Land, that could ever send a human back in time. Jaehwan asked what he meant, suddenly recalling the Frost Dragon's words. If their raid hadn't been manipulated by the Stone of Regression, things would have been different. Beastlane cleared it up for him. That wasn't a Stone of Regression, it was actually a Nightmare Stone. The Nightmare Stone had no power to send humans back in time. Instead, it trapped them in an endless loop of dreams generated by the stone itself. Beastlane sneered, admitting he never imagined humanity would actually make it all the way to the 77th floor. Humans were so obsessed with restarting their lives that they couldn't resist the temptation of the Nightmare Stone. Jaehwan fell silent for a moment before replying, "You're right." Sensing he had successfully hooked his prey, Beastlane snapped his fingers, summoning a holographic interface. He began coaxing Jaehwan to start the real game. Not to return to the past, but to play the actual game from the very beginning. Beastlane was smugly confident that Jaehwan would make the smart choice. But to his absolute shock, Jaehwan didn't hesitate for a second before clicking decline. Thanks to Beastlane's explanations, Jaehwan finally understood the true nature of this tower. He had entered the nightmare where the tower was constructed, and since that was the case, he would hunt down the demon Beastlane and force open the door to the next world. Beastlane shook his head in disbelief. "The next floor? There's no such thing. This is the absolute top of the tower, Jaehwan." Jaehwan refused to believe a single word out of the demon's mouth. While Beastlane was still desperately trying to convince him, Jaehwan unleashed a single, devastating strike that took his head clean off. Beastlane let out a long sigh, his severed head continuing to talk and plead from the ground. He asked what Jaehwan wanted, items, skills, whatever it was, he could grant it all, but Jaehwan tuned him out completely. He didn't need a single damn thing. Beastlane grinned savagely as his head began to slowly regenerate. He told Jaehwan that returning to his original world was physically impossible. Snapping his fingers, Beastlane projected a different set of scenes. He explained that this entire Tower of Nightmares was nothing more than a dream. From the very start, there was never any such thing as tower earthquakes. As Jaehwan stared at the projection, he saw his old world, bustling and peaceful, as if no one had ever died. Jaehwan saw patients lying in hospital beds, and there he was, his own body hooked up to a ventilator. Beastlane pointed out that while Jaehwan had spent an entire century inside the tower, only about 1 month had passed in the real world. No matter how hard he tried, Jaehwan couldn't land a single blow. The gap in power between them was as massive as the difference between a common human and a dragon. Jaehwan fell silent, but he didn't care. He had slain a dragon before, so he would simply pick up his sword and keep fighting. Having run out of words, Beastlane finally gave up, and the two clashed in a brutal battle. Covered in severe wounds, Jaehwan returned to the blacksmith Jay's workshop. But with the old man gone, he had no choice but to repair his own sword. Yesterday marked the 72nd time he had challenged Beastlane, yet he still hadn't managed to leave even a single scratch on the demon. Even so, he was still alive. He didn't know why, but the demon clearly had no intention of killing him. So, no matter how many days or years it takes, he still had to keep fighting. Sitting in the control room, Beastlane bit his nails as he watched Jaehwan relentlessly swing his sword, telling himself that he needed to be patient. Jaehwan was a product he had to sell, an extremely special, high-grade commodity for him as a ruler. In all his life, Beastlane had never encountered anyone like this. It was a massive headache. As a ruler who nurtured and trained super VIP products, getting them to fully adapt to the Great Lands required 2 steps. The first step was like selecting good seeds in farming, which meant searching for prime products through the game tutorial. The chosen products would then be nurtured through the main game. The second step was planting those selected seeds and providing them with water and fertilizer. But a product like Jaehwan actually dared to refuse moving on to step 2. Should he just get rid of him once and for all? If Jaehwan died inside the tower, his soul wouldn't just vanish. Beastlane racked his brain, thinking hard. But what if Jaehwan's soul got damaged because of the massive gap between them? The thought alone gave Beastlane goosebumps. If that happened, the harvesters wouldn't let it slide. To make the sale, he had to find a way to nurture Jaehwan without hurting him. Beastlane tapped his fingers frantically on the armrest. He was so close to becoming a high-ranking demon, not to mention he still had to pay off the debt he owed to the tower. Jaehwan was such a unique, high-grade product that even gods who never dealt with demons were reaching out to place orders. The more Beastlane thought about it, the angrier he got. Right then, Jaehwan returned. Flying out of the portal, he lunged straight at Beastlane. Even the demon was getting exhausted. "Damn it, what the hell do you want?" Blocking Jaehwan's strikes, Beastlane tried to convince him to just start the main game. He had explained it 100,000 times already. If he participated, it would be a win-win situation. Why on earth wouldn't he join? Jaehwan didn't even bother to answer, letting Beastlane's words go in one ear and out the other. Annoyed, Beastlane reached out, grabbed Jaehwan's chin, and lifted him up, screaming in his face to ask what he wanted. He had already promised him skills and items, so why was he being so damn stubborn? Jaehwan refused to listen, stubbornly repeating the same line over and over that he would defeat Beastlane and move up to the next floor. Losing his temper, Beastlane yelled that he had said it 1,000,000 times already there was no next floor. "Just play the main game, please." Jaehwan went silent for a moment before he finally started asking Beastlane questions. Acting mysterious, Beastlane told Jaehwan not to be too shocked, but the universe was actually made up of more than just one dimension. Jaehwan wasn't surprised at all. He knew that. It was basic knowledge. Theories about parallel universes were all over Earth. Beastlane shifted gears and explained the cosmos in more detail. The universe was composed of a main dimension called the Great Lands. Beastlane even went out of his way to project diagrams to make it easier for Jaehwan to understand. Earth was just a tiny planet in one of the dimensions scattered alongside countless other realms, and they called Earth World 294. Inside this nightmare tower, challengers would acquire skills, items, and stat boosts to adapt to the system of the Great Lands. Jaehwan had been given the chance to go to a new world, while demons like Beastlane were there to run those games. Jaehwan asked him why he was doing all this. Beastlane gave a sly smile, refusing to reveal any more information. He snapped his fingers, and the surrounding space shifted once again. Beastlane knew exactly what Jaehwan was wondering, thinking he wanted to know why, out of the entire infinite universe, these demonic towers appeared on Earth, and why humanity had to suffer this fate. Beastlan went on and on with absolute confidence, acting like he could read Jaehwan's mind. But Jaehwan cut him off. What he actually wanted to ask was why Beastlan was running something like a demonic tower in the first place. Caught off guard, the demon froze in place. Stammering, he scrambled for an excuse, claiming it was just a form of volunteer work. Beastlan broke out in a cold sweat, but tried to play it cool. Trying to sound convincing, he added that demons actually loved volunteering. He even claimed there was a demon on another planet who loved taking care of challengers who had given up. Beastlan desperately tried to convince him, his panic highly visible. Behind him, a system message appeared, reading, "The king has sent you a message regarding product development." Jaehwan's face darkened. Cut the crap. The last time Jaehwan returned from battle, he was covered in wounds and had to constantly drink potions to heal himself. There were no more stats left for him to max out. Yet, he still couldn't lay a single finger on Beastlan. Collapsing onto the cold snow, Jaehwan wondered if humans were truly destined to be defined by mere stats. Suddenly, Jaehwan felt a sharp jolt. Sitting up abruptly, he wondered what it was. He felt a strange sensation in his body. Widening his eyes, Jaehwan saw a golden, shimmering dust in front of him. Thinking he was hallucinating, he reached out to grasp it. Specks of light floated up continuously, sometimes looking like gentle glowing particles, and other times resembling tiny cubes of sugar. They constantly shifted in shape and form. Instinctively, Jaehwan realized these were the very structures that made up the essence of this world. In that split second, Jaehwan saw right through everything. He wasn't buying a single word out of this demon's mouth. He asked, "Who are the monarchs?" Overjoyed that Jaehwan was finally showing some interest, Beastran eagerly explained. The monarchs are the rulers of the Great Land. Players who finish the main game and enter the Great Land usually get guidance and power from them. Depending on the monarch a player chooses, their entire future will change accordingly. Beastran tried to sweet-talk him again, promising that if Jaehwan just listened to him, he would do his absolute best as a demon to place Jaehwan under a legendary monarch. Of course, that all depended on whether Jaehwan played nice and joined the main game. Beastran was certainly a top-tier salesman, and Jaehwan went along with it. He agreed to leave Earth in exactly 10 days. 9 days later, Beastran was still sitting in the control room, keeping a close eye on Jaehwan. He saw that Jaehwan was still training tirelessly. Beastran sighed in annoyance, thinking, this guy is doing that useless garbage again. Like some boring grunt. All the demon had to do was wait just a little longer until the big day. But man, how could he have been so stupid back then? He got totally scammed by those nightmare bastards into buying this trash tower. Frustrated, Beastran slammed the desk repeatedly, cursing out the parents of those scamming nightmare jerks. To be fair, Beastran was tricked into buying the tower after being told it was handcrafted by a legendary nightmare, making it a first-generation masterpiece. This tower was so ancient that even Beastran had no idea when it was actually built. If it were a third-generation tower, like the ones on the market these days, it would have a force shutdown feature for the tutorial without damaging the products. But with this first-generation tower, he was completely out of luck. Beastran was absolutely fuming. He couldn't end the game unless the products agreed to it. So what on earth could he do now? Being broke really is a curse. But then, a sudden glimmer of hope struck his heart. He comforted himself with the thought that all of this would finally be over tomorrow. When the day arrived, Beastran eagerly asked if Jaehwan had memorized all the files. Jaehwan flatly replied, "Yeah." Now all that is left is to press yes. Beastran was so moved he practically teared up. He had been waiting for this moment for ages. But right in the middle of his emotional breakdown, Jaehwan suddenly drew his sword and ran him clean through. Stunned, the demon asked, "What do you think you're doing?" Jaehwan gripped his hilt tightly, spinning around and unleashing a flurry of thrusts. Ever since he started seeing those golden particles of light, his thrusting motion had become incredibly stable. With every stab, a strange sense of dissonance washed over him, as if something deep inside was finally waking up. Jaehwan simply followed the trail of light, thrusting forward. Suddenly, he saw the light of the stab's trajectory, filling him with pure joy. Was this what it actually felt like to be alive? Beastran was completely shredded. In desperation, he summoned the black ironwood from the 99th floor to bind Jaehwan. His body slowly started piecing itself back together. Incredible, this was the first time he had ever encountered someone like Jaehwan. If only the guy had cooperated, it would have been a win-win for both of them. In the end, without the guy's consent, there was no way to finish the game. In fact, the demon had given up on getting Jaehwan's approval a long time ago. He asked him, "What made you think this tutorial would last forever? This nightmare tower is programmed to automatically end the game 100 days after it's cleared." So, Jaehwan didn't have to do a single thing. He just had to sit tight and quietly wait to enter the main game. Jaehwan froze for a moment, but then he tightened his grip on his sword. He wasn't stupid enough to be fooled by this demon. In the Great Land, Beastrain was known as the Gentleman of Manipulation, having lived for 784 years and traveled across 128 worlds. Beastrain had been carrying out his disgusting cultivation business with the races of those worlds. Completely exposed, the demon asked in shock, "How? How do you know all that?" Not only that, but Jaehwan also knew Beastrain wanted to hand him over to a harvester known as the Dark Monarch. Beastrain gasped in terror. "Who the hell are you?" Looking down from above, Jaehwan replied that while he was a product Beastrain had raised for decades, he no longer considered himself a mere product. Breaking free from the bindings, Jaehwan pressed on with his attack. Beastrain was scared out of his mind, sweat pouring down his face as he watched Jaehwan charge at him with terrifying, murderous intent. Taking a painful, brutal slash, Beastrain panicked, completely unable to comprehend what was happening. Ever since stepping onto the 100th floor, Jaehwan had been plagued by doubts. Was this tower just another part of the nightmare, and was Beastrain actually incapable of killing him? His doubts ran even deeper. Are humans really worth nothing more than these arbitrary stats? Is the very fabric of this world about to shatter? Countless questions raced through Jaehwan's mind. Once there was nothing left to doubt, he finally mastered the ultimate thrusting technique. And right now, he was unleashing that exact technique on Beastrain, while the demon desperately struggled to piece his shattered body back together. Bad joke. Beastrain flies into a rage, baring his fangs and claws to strike back at Jaehwan. He had to admit, reaching the second level of adaptation just by completing the tutorial, the guy's talent was absolutely insane. But a mortal is still just a mortal. No way he could ever defeat Beastrain. Snorting in contempt, the beast sends sharp thorns piercing through Jaehwan's body, sending blood spraying everywhere. Yet, his grip on his weapon never wavers. His stats begin to skyrocket, soaring all the way up to 9,999,999,999. Beastrain unleashes a furious assault, but Jaehwan stands his ground. The numbers don't stop there. They tick up one more notch, hitting a massive 10 billion. Once again, Jaehwan catches sight of that blinding white light. Gripping his hilt tightly, he thrusts his sword forward, following the path of the light. Reeling from the blow, Beastrain is in utter disbelief. What on earth is this guy? This isn't adaptation. This is a full-on awakening. Beaten to a pulp, Beastrain collapses, completely flattened on the ground. Jaehwan looks down at him with pure disgust, warning him never to reduce human lives to mere numbers to be measured. Humans aren't commodities for beasts like him to buy and sell. Staring at the blade pointed right at his face, Beastrain shuts his mouth, not daring to utter a single word. Jaehwan did exactly what he said he would. He defeated Beastrain, ready to climb to the next floor and find the end of this godforsaken world created by those bizarre entities. Slowly, the space inside the tower begins to shatter as a brilliant light of truth pierces right through. Jaehwan's stats completely glitch out, turning into uncountable variables. Beastrain is left utterly speechless, wanting to cry but having no tears left. He desperately begs Jaehwan to stop, screaming that there is no next floor. But Jaehwan's conviction remains absolutely unshakable. He isn't just being stubbornly persistent. Back on the lower floors, he had spotted some crude scribbled carvings. Reading those words felt like witnessing the raw agony of an artist pouring his soul out. According to the stone carvings left by someone named Mulak, the creator of the Nightmare Tower, there is still something called the Illusion Tree that exists. Holding the Frost Dragon sword with a terrifying look on his face, Jaehwan demands to know if Beastrain knows how this place became the root of the Illusion Tree. According to his theory, if there are roots, then there must be a trunk. If he shatters the ceiling of this floor, something is bound to happen. With that, Jaehwan thrusts his spear, piercing right through the roof. Beastrain screams in absolute despair. The system begins calculating the end of the tutorial game, only to conclude that the calculation has failed. With no more walkers left inside the Nightmare Tower, Jaehwan vanishes without a trace. The tutorial game is officially over. When Jaehwan opens his eyes, he finds himself in an unfamiliar place, surrounded by dense trees and a horde of monsters bearing their fangs and claws. The monsters rush at him all at once, but Jaehwan simply swings his sword. It takes just a single strike to take one down, but then a much larger monster emerges. Realizing his previous slash wasn't strong enough to finish it, Jaehwan swings his sword with more force, blowing the beast to pieces. Once all the monsters are dealt with, he begins pulling the horns off each and every one of them. Just as he hoists them onto his back to leave, a swarm of insect-like monsters blocks his path. They point at him arrogantly, shouting something that sounds pretty intense. Too bad Jaehwan doesn't understand a single word they are saying. Even with his analysis and appraisal skills, Jaehwan is still a reasonable guy. He points to the pile of horns he just gathered, trying to strike a deal with them. If they want them, they can have them, but in return, they have to tell him where this place is. However, the monsters refuse to listen. Hell-bent on a fight, they charge forward to attack Jaehwan. He can only sigh at them, stupid bugs with pea-sized brains, practically begging to meet their maker. He has no other choice but to wipe them all out. The remaining bugs are in utter shock that a mere mortal could easily defeat them. Jaehwan grabs one by its antenna, demanding to know where they are, but the bug refuses to utter a single word. With its final breath, it spits out, "I'll kill you," before biting its own tongue and dying on the spot. Jaehwan sighs. He thought they were weak, but their willpower is actually stronger than he expected. Looking at the antenna in his hand, he decides to pile up some dirt and stick it in like a tiny headstone. Jaehwan searches the area to see if there's any loot. He manages to find a small spatial pouch. Lucky for him, now he has something to store his items in. He realizes he can no longer access the system interface after leaving the Nightmare Tower. He thought he would at least be able to use the interface of this new, different world, just like the Almighty Land, but absolutely nothing works. Just thinking about it makes him furious, that lying bastard Beastrain. At least he can still use his analysis and appraisal skills to check the details of his items. He holds up and inspects the gems he just gathered before packing them all into his spatial pouch. The spatial pouch has its limits, and with too many items left over, Jaehwan has no choice but to throw some of them away. After a while, he sifts through his newly acquired loot again, only to find nothing useful. He grabs a nearby map and rolls it open. This is a map of Chaos, a location that wasn't included in any of the information Beastrain gave him. Nearby, a group of hunters is out tracking beasts, consisting of a red-haired girl and a few big, sweaty guys. The girl throws a dagger, but instead of hitting the monster, she accidentally impales the knee of a red-haired guy. Even though he is annoyed, he lets it slide because she is cute, but it doesn't end there. That red-haired girl was out there provoking a two-horned monster and dragging it right toward them. Up high, Jaehwan stood watching the whole situation unfold. In his estimation, that red-haired woman seemed to be the strongest among them. He couldn't fathom how people with such low levels and basic skills could have ever cleared a nightmare. Over on the other side, the red-haired guy gritted his teeth, preparing to charge with his signature skill, Breath of the Fire King, when suddenly, another dagger flew straight at his face. The one who threw it was that red-haired girl again, who casually smirked and said, "Sorry." The red-haired guy's patience had reached its limit, and he screamed in rage, "You and your filthy mouth!" She acted completely unfazed, even reminding him, "Hey, the monster is right in front of you." Seeing the beast open its massive jaws, ready to bite down on the red-haired guy, Jaehwan suddenly lunged forward and took the monster out with a single strike. Once the group finished carving up the two-horned monster's carcass, Jaehwan decided to travel along with them. The group was still riding high, absolutely thrilled about bagging a two-horned monster. Jaehwan thought to himself that the beast he previously defeated with his shatter slash had at least 5 horns. So, he figured the more horns a monster had, the stronger it must be. Furious that her plans were ruined, the red-haired girl bit her nails in frustration before turning to ask Jaehwan, "Who even are you?" There is no way an adapter in Chaos is strong enough to kill a two-horned monster with just a single, basic strike. She demanded to know where he came from. Jaehwan just muttered back to her, "What on earth is Chaos?" She froze, completely dumbfounded by his response. Meanwhile, the red-haired guy eagerly started asking Jaehwan for his personal details. He simply told them he was just a passerby and couldn't speak the local language. The red-haired girl's mind was still racing. Jaehwan had taken down that two-horned monster so effortlessly, and he didn't even use a skill. She couldn't even use her inspection skill on him, even though his willpower seemed to be only at the level of a non-adapter. She whispered to Jaehwan, "The number of adapters in Chaos who can defeat a two-horned beast in a single blow can be counted on one hand." Once again, she demanded to know who he was and where he came from, and once again, Jaehwan repeated his question, "What the hell is Chaos anyway?" The red-haired girl was losing her mind, genuinely wondering if he could hear in. Jaehwan understood what she wanted to know, but when it came to who he was, he had no idea how to answer. The place he belonged to and the relationships he had back on Earth all became completely meaningless the very moment he stepped into that tower. In return, he had gained new comrades and memories, but once the tutorial ended, they all vanished as if they were nothing but an illusion, even though his former comrades who fought alongside him were definitely out there somewhere on Earth, and his reward was supposedly keeping those memories intact. When they restart, they won't remember him or any of the times they spent together in the tower. So Jaehwan simply replied, "I don't remember anything." The red-haired girl pretended to be sympathetic, but not even 3 seconds later, she was screaming right in his face. There was no way she was buying it. No matter how deadpan Jaehwan's delivery was about having amnesia, it wasn't going to work on her. She absolutely refused to believe him. Jaehwan muttered, "I never said I had amnesia." But the red-haired girl just kept grumbling and complaining. She sarcastically asked if he was some supreme being from the Great Lands or something. Jaehwan glanced around, his hand moving to grip the hilt of the sword at his waist as he drew it. After throwing a few smaller swords in there for it to feed on, the red-haired girl fell silent, gasping in shock. A spirit weapon. She figured that Jaehwan wasn't actually strong himself. He just possessed an incredibly powerful weapon. More importantly, the rest of the group had also noticed the spirit weapon in Jaehwan's hand. Evil thoughts immediately began to brew in their minds. The red-haired girl worried that Jaehwan might ruin her mission. Suddenly, a brilliant idea struck her. She told him she wouldn't ask who he was anymore. Instead, she wanted to make him an offer. She then introduced herself as Mino and gave him a brief rundown of chaos. Soon, their conversation shifted to their respective parties. The red-haired guy's group was a bunch of ruthless thugs from a guild called the Red Fox Clan. Jaehwan quickly put 2 and 2 together, realizing Mino was asking him to eliminate them. As darkness began to fall, the red-haired guy suggested they camp there for the night. Traveling in the dark was suicide, as they could easily trigger the horned beasts. While the group set up a campfire and rested, Jaehwan stretched out under a tree. According to the map, there was a village nearby. He reached out, catching a few floating particles of light drifting through the air. Jaehwan could easily overhear the red-haired thugs whispering to each other. They were already plotting a way to get rid of him. They believed Jaehwan was only strong because of his spirit weapon, which was a legendary artifact that could only be obtained in the Great Lands. Jaehwan heard every single word. He knew they were planning to double-cross him. They would absolutely lose their minds if they found out he had actually harvested this weapon from the roots of the Tree of Imagery. Based on what that wench back there told him, the tower's gear wasn't even that impressive, and he didn't buy for a second that this place was some almighty land. Over on the other side, the thugs slowly began to make their move, but Jaehwan remained as still as ever, not reacting at all. Mino suddenly rushed over, panicking as she hissed, "Why are you still lying there? Do something, quick!" She grabbed his collar, urging him, "You have that sword that devours other weapons, right? Hurry up and use it to wipe them out." Jaehwan calmly replied, "No, I don't." He lent it to the red-haired guys because they wanted to check it out while on night watch. The red-haired girl was absolutely speechless. She couldn't believe Jaehwan would lend his spirit weapon to someone else for such a stupid reason. Right then, the red-haired gang showed up. They surrounded the two of them, clearly having no intention of giving Jaehwan's weapon back. They even mockingly promised to make good use of it, claiming such a powerful sword was just wasted on a useless guy like Jaehwan, so their Red Fox clan might as well take it off his hands. Mino gritted her teeth in anger. These bastards really wouldn't learn their lesson until they were dead. But Jaehwan didn't even flinch. He wanted to see Mino's real abilities, so he just stood by and watched, as the red-haired gang lunged forward all at once. Mino threw a flurry of daggers, hitting several guys dead in their vital spots before delivering a brutal kick to another guy's face. Smirking, she summoned even more daggers, ready for round 2. "I'm already in a bad mood, you little punks. Every single one of you is going straight to hell." The red-haired leader's face hardened. He had a bad feeling ever since Mino lured those monsters to them. She really was a ruthless witch. He gritted his teeth and demanded to know who hired the black market. Mino just smirked and waved her hand without giving him an answer. Instantly, a swarm of daggers flew straight at the red-haired gang. The Red Fox clan had slaughtered countless non-adapters. Even without knowing the specifics, Mino was certain that plenty of people in Chaos wanted them dead. As if the black market would make a move just for those pathetic losers, the red-haired guy scoffed, drawing the weapon he had stolen from Jaehwan. He was highly confident that Mino would meet her end right here. Mino kept her cool, scanning her surroundings to estimate their strength. These guys had at least reached the first stage of adaptation. There were at least 40 men hiding in the area, which was exactly why the red-haired guy was so smug. To take on a witch from the black market and a guy who could kill a two-horned monster in a single blow, he had prepared extensively. If he had known stealing Jaehwan's spirit weapon would be this easy, he wouldn't have gone as far as calling in their guild leader. The captain of the Black Fox Guild, Kellen, had already reached the third stage of adaptation. He was several times larger than a normal human, with a mouth full of jagged teeth and a long tongue dangling out. More than half of the Black Fox Guild's forces had gathered here just to hunt Mino down. She tried to play it cool, but deep down, she wasn't sure she could beat their leader in a one-on-one fight. She turned and called out to Jaehwan, pulling a gemstone from her pocket and tossing it to him. She told him to take it and run, admitting she couldn't protect him anymore. Jaehwan caught the stone, immediately recognizing it as a dreamstone, but he asked anyway, "What is this?" Mino lied and said it was a regression stone, explaining that using it would teleport him to the nearest castle and that it was the only one she had. Jaehwan gripped the gemstone tightly. This wasn't some magical artifact to change the past, it was something that could save someone's life right now. If only he had a real stone back then instead of a useless prop, what would have happened if he could have given a stone like this to Yunwan? Jaehwan muttered, asking Mino, "If there was a way to go back to the past, would you do it?" Mino stared at him, wondering if he had a screw loose for asking such a random question at a time like this. She told him she never would. She preferred to give life her all, and if she had to die today, so be it. But she was never going back to the past. Jaehwan patted her shoulder and said, "You won't be dying today." He drew another sword from his coat and rushed forward like lightning, tearing right through the enemy lines. The guild leader ordered his men to deploy the 14 formation of the Fire King. As the others charged eagerly, Jaehwan didn't even blink. He used his lost footwork to pierce right through their defense, aiming straight for the leader. The leader couldn't block it in time, and the tip of the blade pierced right through his iron armor and deep into his flesh. Jaehwan walked past the guild leader and stood right in front of the red-haired guy. Shaking like a leaf, the thief quickly held the sword out with both hands, begging him to take it back. Jaehwan took back his ice dragon sword and gave a gentle thrust, instantly vaporizing the cowards who were trying to run away. Mino stood there completely frozen, jaw dropped, unable to process what had just happened. She had assumed Jaehwan was just a soft, easygoing guy, which made her think he was a total fool who kept his guard down. But that wasn't the case at all. Mino had got him all wrong. Jaehwan was simply on a whole different level. Mino asked him once more, demanding to know his true identity. Jaehwan gave a faint smirk and replied, "You already know who I am. Did you lose your memory too?" And here I thought I was the only one. Mino got annoyed, stretching out her hand to demand her regression stone back. But Jaehwan calmly replied that he had dropped it. Mino threw a massive tantrum, unable to believe he could lose such an incredibly expensive item. Paying her no mind, Jaehwan walked back to the campfire to resume his rest. Mino refused to give up, frantically searching the ground for the regression stone. Jaehwan calmly sat by the fire, feeding weapons to his ice dragon sword. Staring into the flames, he said, "You already know what I am, Mino. I'm a human." Mino didn't buy it for a second, plopping down onto the ground in disbelief. Jaehwan asked, "Are you a human?" Mino replied, "I'm close enough to one." Jaehwan clenched his fist and muttered, "That's good enough." He fell silent again as a quiet stillness settled over them, and the next day, they continued their journey. Mino still hadn't given up. She asked Jaehwan if he really didn't remember anything about his journey in the Great Lands before ending up in chaos. Mino sighed again, saying, "Must be nice, living with a blank slate." Jaehwan, however, found it hard to understand. What was so great about losing your memories? He then asked how Mino had gotten here. Her face instantly went cold. She warned him that if he found out the answer to that question, he would definitely regret it. After walking for a while, the two of them reached Gorgon Fortress. Jaehwan noticed something that looked like the summoning circle from level 1 of the tutorial game. Suddenly, the circle lit up, and Jaehwan froze in shock. Inside, he could see countless people screaming and weeping. Mino muttered, "Looks like another batch of poor bastards got summoned here." And this, she explained, was exactly how she had ended up in chaos. Looking at the desperate crowd, an overwhelming sadness washed over Mino as she murmured, "Welcome to the world of the dead, Chaos. If someone dies in the Great Lands, their spirit is sent to chaos. But if you die in chaos, that is truly the end of the line. At that point, they simply become nutrients for the tree of imagery." Just then, guards from the fortress began marching out in force. They handed out clothes and ordered the newly summoned souls to line up, preparing to march them to the assembly hall. Mino went over to greet the guard captain, James. He asked what brought her to the northern checkpoint all of a sudden. Mino kept her reasons vague, asking James to just let them pass quickly to save them some trouble, but James flatly refused. He explained that they had recently received strict orders that anyone entering the fortress must present proper identification. Mino decided to try another tactic. She leaned in close, pleading with him while slipping a beast horn into his hand as a bribe to get them through. Seeing such a valuable item, James's eyes lit up. He quickly pocketed it and prepared to look the other way. But then, he turned to check Jaehwan's ID, which, of course, the guy didn't have. Seeing this, Mino decided to tease him, refusing to help unless he begged her for a favor. Jaehwan completely ignored her. Realizing he was being denied entry, he calmly reached for his sword. Seeing this, Mino panicked and rushed to stop him. Cold sweat broke out all over her as she thought, "Is this guy freaking crazy? Is he seriously planning to take out the guards?" Terrified by the mental image of Jaehwan wiping everyone out with a single swing, Mino scrambled forward to intervene. Just as she was about to offer another bribe to get Jaehwan inside, someone else arrived. The moment this man appeared, the guards instantly stood at attention to salute him. He was a famous figure in Gorgon Fortress, the most clean-cut officer in all of Chaos, the notoriously stubborn northern checkpoint captain, Carlton. He demanded that James explain exactly what was going on. Scared out of his wits, James didn't dare to lie. He confessed that Jaehwan was trying to enter without any identification. Carlton coldly began reciting the law. In the event that an individual is unable to verify their identity, the Northern Checkpoint Captain has the full authority to deny them entry. This is clearly stated under Article 27, Section 4 of the Gorgon Fortress Entry Code. As Carlton spoke, he activated his judicial code skill, forcing all the soldiers and even Mino to their knees. However, the skill had absolutely no effect on Jaehwan. With a swift slash of his sword, Jaehwan shattered the chains around Mino's neck. Carlton, mid-sentence, stopped dead in his tracks, staring at Jaehwan in pure disbelief. Jaehwan calmly asked what details were required on this identification, and Carlton patiently explained. An official identification document must include the name of the organization the individual belongs to, along with other details, such as their occupation, primary skills, associated status effects, criminal record, and their soul's corruption level. But before Carlton could even finish, Jaehwan cut him off. He didn't give a damn about any ID, and there was no way in hell he was going to verify his identity. Carlton was still plagued by one question: why hadn't his judicial code worked on him? With a wave of his hand, he unleashed the prison of silver light, reciting another set of laws. Under Article 2, Section 6 of the Gorgon Arrest Code, you are under arrest. Instantly, a barrage of iron chains shot toward Jaehwan, but with a single movement, Jaehwan shattered them effortlessly, leaving the onlookers completely jaw-dropped. Pointing at Mino, Jaehwan asked, "Can't I just bribe you like she did?" Hearing this, the guilty parties froze in terror, trembling uncontrollably. Without waiting for an answer, Jaehwan tossed a beast horn at Carlton, telling him to take it and let him through. Sweating buckets, James shrieked, demanding to know how Jaehwan dared to bribe the captain, screaming that he should be executed on the spot. Carlton raised a hand to silence James. Clutching the horn, his attitude flipped faster than a cheating ex. Carlton suddenly bowed respectfully and greeted Jaehwan, saying, "Welcome, envoy of the 6 clans." Mino was scanned with a soul tester, which showed her corruption level had exceeded 15%, meaning she needed treatment as soon as possible. Jaehwan, on the other hand, had absolutely no idea what the hell soul corruption even was. Soul corruption was a chronic disease that affected everyone living in chaos. Just existing here slowly corrupts your soul, and once it reaches its limit, you face execution. Now it was Jaehwan's turn, as Carlton pressed the scanner against his forehead. The device returned an error, unable to measure his corruption level, leaving everyone around them completely dumbfounded. The screen displayed 0%. Carlton let out a soft chuckle, placed the magic stone back into Jaehwan's hand, and warned him to be careful. Just like that, they handed over the soul stone without a fuss. Mino and Jaehwan were cleared to pass through the gates. James was completely baffled. Why did Carlton just let them go? Carlton turned the question back on him, asking if he even knew what the soul stone was actually used for. Then, he began taking off his gloves. The hand he used to hold the soul stone had turned pitch black. Only those belonging to the Greens can wield a soul stone. They are the only ones who can possess these crystals without suffering from corruption. Even though Jaehwan didn't look like one of the greens, Carlton had seen with his own eyes that the man could use the crystal completely unaffected. It wasn't that Carlton trusted Jaehwan himself, but rather, he trusted Jaehwan's soul. When Carlton tried to measure the level of Jaehwan's soul corruption, the device glitched out. As far as he knew, that measuring device had never made a single mistake. There is only one scenario where the device would fail to measure soul corruption, and that is when the soul is purer than anyone else in chaos. Whether Jaehwan is one of the greens or not, they simply need someone who can utilize the soul stone. The higher-ups inside the fortress will make the final judgment on Jaehwan. For now, Carlton wanted to drop the subject since they had done their part. Instead, he turned his attention to James, grilling him about the bribery from earlier. Meanwhile, as Jaehwan and Mino wandered through the fortress, the layout turned out to be insanely complicated. On top of that, he had to drag a completely brain-dead Mino along. Earlier, Carlton had passed judgment on Mino's offense, citing Article 7, Section 34 of the Gorgon Fortress Entry Code. Anyone who fails to carry or provide identification, as well as those who forge documents or use someone else's pass, can be denied entry or even face severe penalties. However, since Jaehwan had pleaded on Mino's behalf, she was let off the hook, though any form of bribery was strictly forbidden. Citing Article 11, Section 6 of the Gorgon Fortress Entry Code, anyone who offers a bribe, whether in cash or valuable items, along with anyone who accepts such items, will face punishment. Since Mino had been hit with the decree's effect, she was completely spaced out and acting brainless. It would take a while before she snapped out of it. Jaehwan went around asking where he could find a professional blacksmith to forge his frost dragon sword, totally unaware that some shady eyes were already locked onto him. After a while, Mino finally came to her senses. She looked around, utterly dazed, with no clue how she had even entered the town. Jaehwan had just been waiting for her to wake up so they could go their separate ways and she would stop slowing him down. But Mino refused to let him go. She grit her teeth, marched after him, and insisted on being his guide, claiming she knew this place like the back of her hand. Jaehwan could only sigh in sheer helplessness. When he mentioned he was looking for a nightmare, it turned out Mino knew exactly where to find one, so she offered to lead the way. But before they could even make any progress, they were blocked by another blind bunch of thugs trying to rob Jaehwan of his sword. The bandits were a group of four brothers, to be exact. Their youngest brother was a massive titan, and get this, he was only 12 years old. He was raring to go, carrying a giant axe right behind his brothers, leaving Mino completely flabbergasted. Seriously, is it even legal to be that jacked at 12? The thugs demanded the sword, but Jaehwan wasn't having any of it. The giant youngest brother charged in, swinging his axe, but with a single flick of his sword, Jaehwan severed both of his arms and sent him flying 8 meters away, knocking him out cold. Anyone else want a piece of this? Seeing his baby brother get wrecked, the leader flew into a rage. All 3 of them charged at once to avenge their beloved brother. Naturally, they got absolutely demolished. With the bandits out cold, Mino was stunned. She realized Jaehwan only used a single move, a thrust, but executed it at light, medium, and heavy levels. It reminded her of someone else who also relied on a single technique, except that person used a slash instead of a thrust. Mino then asked him why his very first strike had missed. Jaehwan explained he was actually aiming at the roof because he sensed someone using stealth over there, so he threw a warning thrust just to mess with them. To him, it was no big deal. Mino was completely speechless. Still, she eagerly tried to pitch some names for his signature thrust, but he shot down every single suggestion she made. He just didn't care for flashy, over-the-top names. The 2 of them then continued on their way until they reached Twilight's Fall. This was a forge established by a nightmare, and it also happened to be the largest workshop in all of Gorgon. A blacksmith named Naven, who worked there, informed them that placing a custom order today would take some time because the workshop master was currently out. He mentioned only the vice chief was around, but he was backed up with work today too. If they were looking for something, he suggested buying pre-made gear rather than requesting a custom commission. Deep inside the workshop, the vice chief, Maykul, and his apprentices were all crowding around a sword crafted from a quadhorn's horn. Pulling out another horn from his pocket, Maykul issued a challenge to his apprentices. He declared that if anyone could make even a single hole in the sword, whoever they were, he would hand them the position of vice chief of Twilight's Fall for the day. The apprentices eagerly grabbed their tools and tried hacking away at it, but not a single one succeeded. Maycall let out a sigh, telling them they were still wet behind the ears, and that with hands as soft as noodles, they would never even leave a scratch on that horn. Pushing past Naven, Jaehwan stepped up and volunteered to give it a shot. Maycall had no idea who he was, and simply assumed he was just some wandering craftsman. He readily agreed, proudly thumping his chest, boasting that only someone with his elite skills could handle a horn like this. It was the horn of a four-horned monster, an extremely difficult material to process. Jaehwan walked up to the horn, gave it a gentle tap, and poked a hole right through it. He casually spun the horn around his finger. Today, he was going to be the shop's assistant. Before 3 seconds could even pass, the poked horn shattered into pieces right in front of everyone's stunned eyes. Mekhan, absolutely furious, roared and grabbed Jaehwan by his collar. That horn was insanely expensive. The horn of a four-horned monster is worth an absolute fortune. How were they supposed to explain this to the Elder Council who had ordered it? Jaehwan said he would replace it with a better horn, but Mekhan couldn't bring himself to trust a beggar-looking guy like Jaehwan. How could there possibly be anything better than the horn of a four-horned monster anyway? Jaehwan pulled the horn of a five-horned monster, a Garnak, out of his pocket and handed it to Mekhan. He handed it to the shop manager as compensation, since he didn't have a four-horned monster's horn on him. Mekhan held the rare horn in his hands, his eyes lighting up. He immediately ordered his apprentices to close up the shop. As the new assistant, Jaehwan was free to use all the equipment and staff here today. Seeing that everything was settled, Mino left Jaehwan there and went out to take care of some business. Mekhan asked Jaehwan how he managed to get the horn of a five-horned monster. Slipping off his coat, he casually replied that he hunted it himself. Mekhan couldn't believe Jaehwan had hunted a five-horned monster all by himself. People who could do that were incredibly rare in all of Chaos. Putting on an apron, Jaehwan mentioned he needed a scabbard, though he had never made one before. Mekhan thought his ears were playing tricks on him. Jaehwan wanted to use Garnak's horn just to make a scabbard? Just how incredible must the sword be then? Jaehwan pulled out the Ice Dragon sword. Mekhan took it, assuming it was a replica, a very rare one crafted by a nightmare. Still, he suggested Jaehwan should just forge a new sword, even if this replica looked stunning. Suddenly, the sword in Mekhan's hand began to vibrate violently, startling him into dropping it. The sword literally opened a mouth and bit into the five-horned monster's horn. Mekhan broke out in a cold sweat. From the spiritual energy radiating from it, the sword seemed to harbor the soul of an elite race. After devouring it, the Ice Dragon sword began to show signs of evolving. Judging by its dramatic physical changes, this was a major evolution. Once the evolution was complete, its user would need to give it a new name. Because when a spirit weapon undergoes a major evolution, its original name is completely erased. Jaehwan scolded the Ice Dragon sword, warning that if it kept eating without permission, he would rename it the Pig Sword. He pulled out another horn and handed it to Mekhan, wanting to watch how he refined materials into custom shapes. Feeling the sudden weight of that trust, Mekhan vowed to show him the true skills of the Twilight Blacksmith of Gorgon Fortress. Fortress Commander Carlton Javier sipped his tea while listening to his subordinate's report. The subordinate was the exact same stealth specialist Jaehwan had spotted earlier. Before he could even process what was happening, he woke up to find himself lying unconscious on a rooftop. Because of that, he had completely lost track of Jaehwan. The commander pondered. To detect the stealth skills of a third-stage adapter, he had to be at least a fifth-stage adapter. He ordered his subordinate to deploy more men to find Jaehwan, even if they had to tear the city apart. The subordinate bowed and left. Carlton let out a heavy sigh, feeling a massive headache coming on. Clenching his fists, he silently prayed for the Castellan to hold on just a little longer. In a local tavern, a large screen broadcasted a video of a young man clearing the 99th floor all by himself. The young man's face was blurred, and the crowd whispered excitedly, wondering what had happened to him. Rumors claimed he had fled and abandoned his duty. The crowd insisted the video was fake. After all, how could anyone possibly conquer the first-generation tower completely alone? Suddenly, the door swung open, and Mino sauntered in. Because she was so drop-dead gorgeous, she instantly turned every head in the room. She walked over to the bar counter and sat down. A drunkard tried to slide over and hit on her, but Mino gave him such a lethal glare that he shut his mouth and backed off instantly. Feeling incredibly frustrated, she ordered some drinks and chugged them down until she was wasted. She kept complaining about Jaehwan to Claire, the tavern owner, calling him a total headache of a man. Claire sighed. "Stop acting like a pathetic drunk. You can have any man you want, so why hang yourself on that one tree? Mino, however, remained thoroughly annoyed. Just thinking about Jaehwan irritated her. He destroyed everything. Whether people liked it or not, he just swung his sword as if he didn't care about the rules of this place at all, not to mention the bizarre things he said. Mino felt dejected. Jaehwan made her feel utterly insignificant. Everyone here worked so hard, yet Jaehwan just crawled out of some random hole and looked down on her with an expression that said they were on completely different levels. Every time Mino saw that look on his face, it drove her absolutely crazy. Claire patted Mino's head to comfort her, advising her to stay far away from Jaehwan. Getting mixed up with him could easily get her killed. Right then, a golden pigeon flew in, dropping a letter from Carlton into Mino's hand. She got a terrible, bad feeling. Just as she was about to open it up, someone snuck up right behind her. Mino gasped and quickly drew her weapon to strike, but the intruder grabbed her hand in a tight grip. He glared at Mino. It wasn't that he disliked getting physical, but he was busy today, so he would save it for another time. He asked Mino to do him a favor. Meanwhile, Megan was thrown to the ground. He trembled as he stared at the pentahorn monster before him. How could he possibly forge a sword like this? How could a blade even turn into something like this? Jaehwan grabbed him by the collar, telling him to snap out of it. They were in the middle of refining, and if he was going to help, he needed to do it right. Panting heavily, Megan gave up. He couldn't do it anymore. He couldn't even touch it. This horn was just on a level far too high for his refining skills. Jaehwan placed his hand over the old man's eyes. It wasn't a matter of skill level, but perception. Megan awakened the first stage, suspicion, the power to shatter the true nature of reality by questioning the world. As Jaehwan removed his hand, Megan awakened the second stage, understanding the power to see the corrupted state of the world. Megan looked back at the horn. A splash of black fluid shot up, revealing a pentahorn monster with its tongue lolling out. Megan cursed, stumbling backward and falling over himself. Jaehwan urged him, "You said you'd help, so do it right." But Megan was trembling so hard he couldn't even stand. The true form of the pentahorn monster was absolutely horrifying. Had he really been using his amateur skills on a monstrosity like this? Megan thought he was dreaming. He looked around frantically and bolted for the door, desperate to wake up from this nightmare. Jaehwan sighed and clicked his tongue, but he didn't stop him. Megan threw the door open and screamed for help, only to freeze dead in his tracks at the sight of a crowd of skeletons. Megan stood there, completely paralyzed with fear. The skeletons demanded, "Is his refining done yet? An ignorant fool has no right to see this place." Megan shivered. His eyes widened in disbelief, wondering how he could even survive in a world like this. Why did he have to die in a place like this? Meanwhile, Jaehwan faced the monster all on his own. Before long, Jaehwan brought it down. Megan wailed in despair, tears and snot streaming down his face as he sat there, utterly dazed and muttering to himself. Some things in this world are simply futile, no matter how many times you try, like a mere mortal trying to match the craftsmanship of a nightmare, or trying to surpass the limits of nature. Megan was just too old to process the horn of a Garnak. Lighting a cigarette, he fell completely silent, a sharp contrast to his earlier loudmouth self. There was no sign of his former arrogant boasting. Actually, Jaehwan hadn't come here for him. He was looking for the manager of the Nightmare's blacksmith shop. The last time the shop manager had set foot outside was ages ago. He was the only one who could help Jaehwan right now. But looking at him now, he was a pathetic sight. Jaehwan didn't really care. He told Megan, "All I need is a scabbard. Just keep going." But Megan refused. He had tried enough. Jaehwan disagreed, telling him he could do it if he just tried 100 million times. Megan chuckled dryly. Ah, to be young. To Jaehwan, it probably looked like he wasn't trying. But he really had given it everything he had. He had tried his absolute best while watching Jaehwan work, whether the kid believed him or not. Megan had mastered every single skill related to blacksmithing. He could now say with absolute confidence that he could repair any weapon in Nightmare with a 99% success rate. But after achieving that success, Megan had a realization. Perhaps he hadn't actually been aiming for that 99% success rate, but was instead running away from the 1% chance of failure. Lost in thought, Jaehwan stood up. He acknowledged that Megan worked harder than anyone else. Then, he asked if Megan knew the actual theory behind processing skills. Megan replied that he did. A Nightmare's processing skill was one of the original skills. It was something that had existed from the very beginning, just like fire and water. How could a human possibly explain the origin of the world? And even if they could, what would be the point of explaining such things anyway? But Jaehwan countered, pointing out that Megan was using a skill without truly understanding what he was doing. Megan silently snuffed out his cigarette. Based on what Jaehwan said, he guessed the theory was about reinforcing the hammer and chisel with spirit power, then refining that energy to suppress the horn. He pointed to his disciples. If the concept is that simple, then why can't any of these guys use the processing skill? Megan stood frozen, completely dumbfounded. If the theory behind this processing skill was really that simple, then even if they hadn't officially learned it, shouldn't they still be able to do something similar? Panic-stricken, Megan turned to Jaehwan and asked if he actually knew the theory behind the processing. Jaehwan hadn't known before, but he had recently figured it out. He touched the horn, and instantly, its outer shell liquefied and dissolved into golden dust. He told the others to take a closer look and tell him what they saw. Megan watched the separating golden particles. His own monumental efforts had pushed the limits of the world he could see to its absolute threshold. There was absolutely nothing wrong with his hard work. If he still couldn't achieve anything after all that effort, then the problem wasn't him, it was the world itself. It was as if a profound truth had suddenly hit Megan. He was taken back to his past, to his days as a young apprentice. He had no idea how he'd messed everything up. After all, the technique he was using belonged to the nightmares, not to mere humans. There was never a path for humans in the first place. As long as you are human, you can never surpass the crafting level of a complete amateur. Maycall had tried everything to break past human limits and match the level of a nightmare. But it was all in vain. Lost in utter despair, he didn't know what to do. Was he supposed to wage war against the entire world? This is a cold, harsh world where people only get exactly what they work for. So, what was so wrong with just getting used to living here? But Jaehwan steps in to slap some sense into Maycall, telling him that this world has been lying to him, convincing him he can't do what he's actually capable of. He might be old, but he's still got plenty of fight left in him. Jaehwan encourages Maycall, urging him to look closer at the horn. Stop relying on the system and start looking with his own eyes. Taking his advice, Maycall looks deeper and deeper. He sees a vision of Jaehwan charging forward at breakneck speed, making him wonder, does Jaehwan constantly see the world in this raw, unfiltered way? A world completely stripped of skills or interfaces, a transparent reality where there are absolutely no exceptions? How could anyone live like that without losing their mind? Grabbing his chisel with a tight grip, Maycall lets out a roar and drives his hammer down. Meanwhile, as Jaehwan steps out of Twilight's fall, he turns to Mino and asks why she's still following him. Up to no good again, are we? Mino walks up to him, half joking and half serious, as she replies, "Actually, I'm planning to kill you." Jaehwan doesn't even flinch, coldly asking what she could possibly gain from killing him. A lavish life powered by the mountain of spirit stones he owns? Mino shoves a bundle into his chest and tells him to take it, explaining that it's a few change of clothes, since she hates being a freeloader. She then asks him, "If you can't even get in touch with a nightmare, what's your next move?" Jaehwan replies that Maycall already gave him a lead on how to find them. He plans to track them down, get answers about the Tree of Imagery, and find a way into the abyss. Mino can't fathom why he's throwing his life away like this. Even if he gets lucky and somehow manages to stir up the abyss, the absolute powerhouses raining down there will never let him off the hook, and he'll never be able to return. Jaehwan simply looks at her and says, "I have no intention of returning." Mino stands there, completely dumbfounded before losing her mind. She screams at him, demanding to know how he could dare to pull such an earth-shattering stunt. "Who do you think you are? Just doing whatever you want without giving a single damn about what anyone else thinks." Letting all her frustration explode, she yells that she can't stand the fact that Jaehwan doesn't even view the people here as real human beings. She and everyone in this place are humans too. Sure, they might not be as ridiculously strong and brave as he is, but they are absolutely still human. Jaehwan just stares at Mino. He can easily read between the lines and realize someone has been threatening her. If Mino breaks her promise, the hostage dies. She is forced to play along, seduce him, and lure him to a specific location. Jaehwan blinks, instantly piecing the puzzle together. He even senses that the creep tailing them from across the street is one of the thugs. Is he supposed to risk his life just to save some random hostage? How utterly pointless. No matter how many times he saves the people in this place, nothing will ever change. The ugly reality right before his eyes is the ultimate truth of this world. A world controlled by the powerful who hoard all the wealth and information, while desperate souls gladly sell their own humanity for a slightly better payout. He decides to take care of the spy quickly and continue his search for a nightmare. Just then, Minho grabs his shirt tightly and screams that they are done and that their paths part here. How could I ever work with a heartless bastard like you? Minho snaps before storming off, leaving Jaehwan standing there completely frozen. At that moment, a strange thought crosses his mind. Why does Minho seem so human right now? Still, he keeps his guard up, tracking the movements of the enemies, lurking in the shadows. Those creeps will probably head back to report that their plan to draw out a nightmare has completely blown up in their faces. After their explosive fight, Minho heads back to the tavern. But the moment she pushes the door open, she finds the entire place completely trashed, with shattered tables and chairs everywhere. Waiting inside is a gang of thugs, and they have the tavern owner, Claire, held hostage at weapon point. Leading them is the elder of the Jeonmyeong sect, who also happens to be the oldest of the Janya trio. He glares at Minho and demands, "Why are you back here alone? What happened to our deal?" Refusing to go down without a fight, Minho summons a storm of daggers and hurls them straight at the gang with deadly intent. But the elder's men instantly activate their shadow arts, sending a swarm of pitch-black figures rushing at her. Minho nimbly dodges their attacks, but she can't react fast enough to avoid a lethal slash from the elder himself. Severely wounded, Minho collapses to the floor. The elder looks down at her with pure disgust, sneering, "We've set up a soundproofing barrier around this place, so nobody out there has any clue what's going on in here. So stop your pathetic screaming and bring the target here already." Grabbing Claire by the hair and ripping her head back, the elder warns Minho not to pull any stupid stunts. They are fully aware that there isn't a single Blackguard officer left in the Gorgon Fortress right now, so she can forget about any rescue. By the time anyone actually bothers to look for them, both she and Claire will be nothing but dried-up corpses. But Minho refuses to back down. Summoning her last ounce of strength, she unleashes her ultimate technique, the 7 daggers of Alkaram, and hurls them all straight at the elder's face. But with just one easy swing of his sword, the old man shatters her poison trap. Minho gets absolutely wrecked by the elder. At this point, she can't help but think of Jaehwan's question from before. If there was a way to go back to the past, would she return? Desperate and helpless, Minho prepares to accept her death. She wants to go back to the past. She wants to live. If she had followed him, would she have witnessed the end of this world? Just as the elder's blade is about to strike, a massive force blocks it. They say the protagonist always shows up at the last second. Jaehwan indeed makes a legendary entrance. He tosses the bundle of clothes back to Minho. He complains that those clothes don't fit him. Seeing the very target they were looking for, the elder and his men grin with smug satisfaction. The Soul Stone has delivered itself to them, making their job even easier. Jaehwan points his sword right at them. "Excuse me, is the nightmare here? Bring the nightmare to me." The gang stares at Jaehwan like he is some kind of alien. Is this guy completely out of his mind? Looking at the fortress rebel, he is exactly like the rumors say. Minho struggles to her feet, warning Jaehwan to be careful. That guy is a level 1 imitator. His rank is incredibly high, so do not underestimate him. Jaehwan does not give a damn, because there is no way he is going to lose. Infuriated by his arrogance, the group charges in to attack. Jaehwan raises his sword and takes a test stab. The elder tilts his head to the side to dodge it. They have immediately become more cautious of him. "You are not an imitator. You must be one of those with the power of the abyss." Jaehwan observes them closely. So far, the only thing that has managed to dodge his full power strike was the 5-horned beast. So, a level 4 imitator might be on the same level as that thing. This battle is going to be intense, but he does not care. Either way, he is going to take them all down. The other side starts playing dirty. They use the hostage to threaten him, shouting, "Come on then, make a move." Claire does not care about her own life. She screams, telling them to just go ahead and attack. But before she can finish, one of the thugs slaps her hard across the face. Minho is incredibly worried, telling Claire to hold on. She then turns to Jaehwan, begging him to save her friend. Holding his ice dragon sword, Jaehwan does not understand why Minho is asking him for this. From the beginning, he only came here to find the nightmare. He just needs to destroy everything in his path, whether they are enemies or hostages. Minho tightly grabs Jaehwan's clothes, begging him to save her, crying out that she is a human being too. Jaehwan is taken aback, and the vision in his eyes changes. He sees Claire screaming with determination, urging him to just attack. Jaehwan grits his teeth and unleashes a blast from his sword into the sky. The beam of blue light shooting straight up catches the attention of the guards. Carlton sees that Jaehwan has broken the barrier. The tavern is quickly surrounded. Carlton walks in from the outside and asks what is going on. Jaehwan points at the elders group, accusing them of breaking the law. He says he does not know the exact details, but he guesses they are breaking the Gorgon Penal Code, Chapter 276, Section 4, or something like that. Jaehwan even plays the victim to turn the tables, accusing the group of trying to use the tavern as a base to destroy the world by conspiring with the nightmares. Carlton understands the situation perfectly. He rattles off a series of laws, citing Gorgon Penal Code, Chapter 174, Section 4, and Chapter 124, Section 6, for illegally destroying private property inside the fortress and kidnapping residents. The elders group is now under arrest without a warrant. Realizing things have gone south, the elder prepares to make a run for it. Carlton is not about to let them slide. He unleashes his silver chains, immediately securing two of the elder's lackeys. Refusing to give up, the elder lunges at Carlton. Carlton pulls out an axe, blocking the incoming blade so hard it starts to crack. The elder steps back to gain momentum, gearing up for another swing. Carlton quickly binds the elder's hands with his silver chains, rendering him completely helpless. The old man collapses to the ground and surrenders. But the old man is still playing dirty. He pulls out a hidden object and throws it right behind Carlton. A sphere rolls out, releasing toxic smoke. Taking advantage of the chaos, the three of them make a run for it out of the tavern. One of them inhales the gas and passes out cold. Outside, someone is already waiting for them. It is Siren, an elder of the Golden Sky clan and a nightmare of the Tower of Remorse. She asks if the poison witch is really that hard to deal with, demanding they capture her alive and hand her over. The elders group explains that the situation inside is not just about the poison witch, there is also another tough guy with chains. Jaehwan helps Mino as he kicks the door open. He thrusts his sword straight toward the tree where the elders group is standing. They can't believe Jaehwan is still fine after inhaling the toxic gas. This time, with the nightmare of the Tower of Remorse backing them up, Jaehwan has to face all three of them on his own. Jaehwan drives the horn into the ground. He really didn't want to resort to using this. Honestly, having to rely on an item's skill is pretty embarrassing. The horn driven into the ground unleashes the terrifying aura of a demonic beast. The elder and his lackey practically piss themselves in terror from the overwhelmingly ferocious aura. Their legs turn to jelly, and they collapse to the ground. Realizing she is outmatched, Siren immediately turns around and hauls ass, leaving her subordinates to fend for themselves. The elder glared bitterly at his two subordinates, who were now lying completely motionless. He gritted his teeth, never expecting things to end up like this. Jaehwan stepped right up to him. He offered the old man a deal to save his own skin, asking him where the nightmare was hiding. The elder clenched his jaw, refusing to speak. He knew that even if he talked and survived this, it would all be for nothing. Once that person found out, he would be a dead man anyway. Even though the old man didn't utter a word, Jaehwan could read his every thought. Out of sheer desperation, the elder pulled out a spirit stone and bit into it. Under normal circumstances, no one would dare consume a spirit stone. Nobody wanted their soul corrupted, and nobody wanted to die. But as soon as the elder bit the spirit stone, his body began to distort. He transformed into a massive, grotesque monster covered in writhing, tangled vines. The beast immediately started attacking the innocent bystanders nearby. Yet, a tiny shred of the elder's consciousness remained, and in that moment, he finally saw the truth of the world. What good was dignity in a world like this? What had he been so afraid of? Now, he was finally free. Why hadn't he done this sooner? But suddenly, a cold shiver ran down his spine as he felt Jaehwan's piercing gaze. In a panic, the elder swung his massive arm, attacking him. He couldn't stand the thought of a mere human existing in this world. Meanwhile, Jaehwan calmly analyzed his monstrous opponent. He couldn't identify who the old man was, even with his appraisal skill. But it didn't matter anymore. Jaehwan raised his sword and thrust it straight at the monster. The monster's head flew off, rolling across the ground, and the elder slowly turned to dust. Jaehwan sheathed his sword and walked away. He needed to search through the ruins of the bar to find someone who could tell him the nightmare's location. Meanwhile, Mino sat in a dark corner, desperately telling Jaehwan not to come any closer. Nearby, Carlton was in no better shape, severely wounded and clinging to life. Mino grabbed a tight hold of Jaehwan's shirt, begging him to kill her. She wanted to die while she was still herself. A dark, ominous aura began to wrap around her body, and a stunned Jaehwan quickly pulled Mino into his arms. To him, she was now a real human being. He couldn't understand why he hesitated every time he looked at her, and why couldn't he just maintain that cold indifference? Jaehwan's hand slowly moved to the hilt of his sword. After all, on the path he had chosen, emotions were nothing but a useless distraction. He shouldn't hesitate. But suddenly, Claire grabbed his hand, stopping his blade, and told him that it wasn't too late. They could still save them. Mino and Carlton were rushed to the medical tent, but the healers could only shake their heads in despair. There was nothing they could do if the corruption continued to spread. Just then, the Gorgon network blared with a sudden emergency alert. A small horde of deadbeats had breached the fortress. Panic ensued as citizens fled for their lives, while those who succumbed to the corruption turned into monsters themselves, tearing through the streets and slaughtering everyone in sight. Sitting beside Mino, Claire spoke softly to Jaehwan. She mentioned how Mino had talked about him all the time. He judged the world purely on his own intuition, all while stubbornly holding on to his humanity. Claire understood people like Jaehwan all too well. She had seen their kind before. People didn't end up in this place because they were foolish. They did it because they had no other choice. It wasn't that the people here lacked courage, but what were they being courageous for? Noble ideals, fighting for justice. Claire guessed Jaehwan was exactly the type to chase after such things. She couldn't comprehend his mindset because she lacked that kind of courage. Yet, she knew one thing for certain. Jaehwan was a dangerous man, and he had to leave. Every time people looked at him, they found hope. If he stayed, it would only lead the citizens of this fortress to deeper despair. Jaehwan fell silent. He thought about many things, his old friends, the countless comrades who had fallen, and Mino. Meanwhile, Carlton was fading fast. They tried crushing a beast's horn to purify Carlton's body, but nothing worked. The process of turning into a deadbeat was already well underway and showed no signs of stopping. Jaehwan stepped forward, grabbed Carlton by the collar, and slapped him twice, forcing him to wake up. Jaehwan had something to ask him. Carlton slowly opened his eyes, only to make the exact same plea as Mino, begging Jaehwan to end his life. Jaehwan was the only one who could do it. Even at death's door, Carlton refused to let go of his duty, weakly reciting the law, according to the special law of Gorgon. Article 1, Section 4. Anyone who is corrupted must be eliminated. Jaehwan tightened his grip on Carlton's collar. Such stubborn loyalty. If only he had a few people like Carlton by his side back then, he wouldn't have been trapped in that godforsaken tower for 45 years. The system warning blared. Soul corruption has reached 94%. Complete transformation into a deadbeat was imminent. Suddenly, Commander Chung-Hu of the elite deadbeat execution unit pushed open the tent flap and stepped inside. He was an S-rank adapter. Chung-Hu drew his weapon and repeated the law, according to the special law of Gorgon. Article 1, Section 4. He would immediately execute Carlton, the commander of the Northern Gate, and Mino. Just as the sword was about to fall, Jaehwan stopped it with one hand. Chung-Hu ordered him to move aside, insisting that he had to put Carlton down. He would soon turn into a monster. It would be an absolute catastrophe if a fifth-stage adapter became a deadbeat. They were here to prevent that from happening. To everyone's shock, Jaehwan suddenly pulled out the horn of Garnak. He crushed it and fed it to Carlton and Mino. But because Mino's body was so weak, her transformation was already accelerating at an alarming rate. The soul's corruption level has exceeded 95%. Morphing is about to begin, and there is no way to stop her transformation anymore. Zahir is about to draw his sword and execute Mino when Claire suddenly stops him. In a complete panic, she begs them to call the Doctor of Despair, Chung-Hu, claiming he can use his dead man's slash to sever the corruption. As Claire is dragged back by the soldiers, Zahir flat out refuses to call the doctor. He argues that Chung-Hu is currently busy with something highly critical in the inner keep, and they can't just summon him here for such a trivial matter. Zahir then barks at Jaehwan to get out of the way, declaring that he can't back down anymore. Jaehwan's face darkens. He draws his sword and calmly states that he will be the one to end Mino's life, since she was the one who asked him to do it. While Claire continues to scream at the top of her lungs, Jaehwan points the tip of his blade toward Mino, causing a dazzling burst of golden light to erupt. Suddenly, Jaehwan finds himself standing in a vast, empty white space. An old man with snow-white hair and a long beard is sitting right next to Mino, and startled by Jaehwan's sudden appearance, he quickly leaps back. Jaehwan immediately tries to use an inspection skill on him, but it has absolutely no effect. Suspecting this old guy is the root cause of the corruption, Jaehwan figures that if he kills him, Mino might actually survive. With that thought, he drags his sword and lunges at the old man. The old man quickly draws his own sword to defend himself, but his blade instantly shatters. Heartbroken over his ruined weapon, he wails in agony and leaps back into the real world. This old man is none other than Chung-Hu, the Doctor of Despair. Zahir is completely stunned by his sudden appearance, wondering why he's here when he's supposed to be with the castle lord. How did he even end up here? Well, Chung-Hu doesn't give a single damn about that. With a gorgeous lady on the verge of kicking the bucket right before his eyes, he has to save her. Who cares about some stupid fortress? Chung-Hu points directly at Jaehwan's face and barks, "You damn brat. Because of you, my dead man's slash was completely ruined, and my dead man's slash can only be executed with a sword made from a trihorn or something even better." Suddenly, Chung-Hu's gaze locks onto the sword hanging from Jaehwan's waist. His eyes spark with excitement, and he begins hovering around Jaehwan, inspecting the weapon with intense curiosity. Jaehwan stops him and asks, if he lends him the sword, will he be able to save Mino? Chung-Hu beams with absolute confidence, declaring that he is 10 billion% sure he can. Without a single second of hesitation, Jaehwan hands over his sword. Chung-Hu grabs it, trembling with pure ecstasy, as he feels a mysterious, raw energy emanating from it, a blade that feels exactly like its master. Chung-Hu swings the sword, testing its weight, and a bright flash of white light bursts forth. But after showing off for just a moment, the old man suddenly loses his breath and collapses to the ground, panting heavily from a severe lack of soul energy. The imaginary world Chung-Hu created begins to shatter, but he no longer has the strength to stand back up. Jaehwan retrieves his sword. Realizing what the young man is planning, Chung-Hu desperately warns him to stop, arguing that there's no way he can copy his dead man's slash when he hasn't even entered his inner world. Jaehwan grips the hilt tightly, calmly replying that he's not planning to slash anything, he's just going to copy it. Chung-Hu tries his best to hold him back, but he doesn't have the strength. Gritting his teeth, Jaehwan holds his sword firm and begins to trace the pattern. This is the first time he's ever raised his sword to save someone's life. Jaehwan silently recalls Mino's face, thinking about how she was always such a stubborn, silly clown. Despite being an assassin, she was incredibly vulnerable, fiercely loyal, and far too trusting of others. With a final, precise stroke, Jaehwan finishes, tracing Mino's form. She slowly opens her eyes as the rot recedes, and her transformation finally grinds to a halt. Claire rushes over in tears, frantically checking on Mino. Jaehwan remains dead silent, showing absolutely no emotion. Chung-Hu chuckles and remarks, "Looks like your narrow mind has expanded a bit. Your mental age just jumped from 5 to 10. The fact that Jaehwan was able to perform the dead man's slash means it's not a skill just any adapter can copy. Under these circumstances, Jaehwan might actually be an awakener. Awakeners are anomalies who can bypass the system's laws. They are a select few who gain incredible, miraculous power by refusing to adapt. An awakener possesses enough strength to completely rewrite the balance of power in chaos. Even across the entire Great Lands, there are barely any who can truly be called awakeners." Zahir suddenly grows incredibly anxious. He recalls Chung-Hu saying that if someone else could use the dead man's slash, they might actually be able to save the fortress master. Suddenly, a man clad entirely in black steps into the tent. He is the captain of the Dark Guard, a Stage 5 adapter. Walking past everyone else, the Dark Captain stops right in front of Jaehwan and drops to one knee with deep respect, greeting him as the special envoy of the Blue Pyrite Flower Guild. He politely invites Jaehwan into the castle. Soon, Jaehwan is escorted to meet the fortress commander, Yuren. After a brief introduction, they get straight to business. The commander asks Jaehwan point blank if he is indeed the envoy of the Blue Pyrite Flower Guild, but Jaehwan denies it without batting an eye. Chung-Hu then chimes in, asking why Jaehwan has the spirit gems, as they are the ultimate proof of membership in the Blue Pyrite Flower Guild. If he isn't a member, where did he get them, and how on earth could he use them without corrupting his soul? Jaehwan casually replies that he just picked them up. He coolly adds that their former owners are dead, and he was the one who finished them off. Zahir snaps out of his seat in shock, asking who would dare harm members of the 6 great guilds. Jaehwan explains that those pests picked a fight first, trying to steal his horn, so he simply beat them up. The fortress commander finally puts the pieces together. The Blue Pyrite Flower Guild is notoriously greedy for resources, so a clash like that makes perfect sense. He then asks Jaehwan to share more details about what happened after his arrival in chaos. After a brief heart-to-heart, the Chancellor set down his teacup. Jaehwan had stumbled into something that dragged him straight to chaos, then just happened to get his hands on the green soulstone to enter the fortress. And after that, he coincidentally got caught up in a riot and ran into Chunghu. Then, he actually tried the Divine Doctor's demonic slash, a move he'd only seen once. Chunghu couldn't believe the Chancellor actually bought Jaehwan's story. Did his brain rot after the Castellan vanished? The Chancellor just smiled. Ignoring Chunghu's words, he turned to Jaehwan and asked, "Your real body is still alive, isn't it?" Jaehwan froze. He hadn't played along with the main game. Instead, he had escaped the nightmare. Right now, he was just in his spirit form. The tree of imagery had mistaken him for a messenger and sent him straight to chaos. As for his real body, it was probably still breathing oxygen back on Earth. Jaehwan asked back, "Chancellor, how did you know I wasn't dead?" From what Jaehwan had said, Jurgen could easily deduce he wasn't dead. After all, nobody would describe their own death in such a casual, half-hearted way. Jaehwan must have had his reasons for keeping his identity under wraps. He neither confirmed nor denied it. He just didn't want to answer. The Chancellor tapped his fingers on the table, admitting he actually owed him an apology for a few things. For over 4 days, his subordinates had been tailing Jaehwan, but Jaehwan already knew that the guy on the roof he had threatened with a warning stab was one of the Chancellor's men. Jaehwan's power was far beyond what Jurgen had anticipated, making tailing him an absolute nightmare. But that didn't mean it was completely useless. The Chancellor projected all the gathered intel on Jaehwan. Over the past few days, his danger level had been marked as SS, with an unmeasurable combat power. The estimated financial damage was approximately 380 million. Hearing that, even Chunghu couldn't help but exclaim, "What a psycho. I don't know if he's a hero or a criminal, but he's definitely not human." Chancellor Jurgen let out a loud laugh. Some might call Jaehwan a hero, while others think he's completely out of his mind. Jurgen was sure everyone would refer to Jaehwan differently, but to him personally, he called someone like Jaehwan the protagonist. Protagonist? Jaehwan didn't have a clue what he was talking about. Was this some kind of webtoon with main and supporting characters? Protagonists are usually famous, but it seemed Jaehwan wasn't famous at all, which meant some powerful force was intentionally suppressing information about him. And that force didn't seem very friendly, either. After all, if they were pulling his strings from the shadows, he wouldn't be struggling so much just to get some basic identification papers. Jurgen believed Jaehwan was a protagonist who had fled to chaos to escape from some powerful organization. Jaehwan fell silent, lost in thought. He wasn't sure about the force behind him, but it could be the Monarch of Darkness, one of the 12 monarchs of the Great Lands. He wondered just how powerful these so-called monarchs actually were. Jurgen said he wouldn't pry into Jaehwan's identity, and they wouldn't hold him responsible for all the damage he had caused. And Gorgon Fortress would protect him. Jaehwan asked back, "Is this fortress strong enough to go up against the 12 monarchs of the Great Lands?" Jurgen got his point immediately and confidently assured him they could. Monarchs are not allowed to directly interfere with whatever happens in chaos. Gorgon would do everything in its power for Jaehwan, but in return, he had to do them one favor, save their Castellan. 2 hours later, the captain of the guard led Jaehwan down to the basement. While Mino and Carlton were recovering in the infirmary, they headed down to the training grounds. Chunghu was dead set on seeing whose move was stronger, Jaehwan's thrust or his slash. Chunghu proposed a condition. If Jaehwan could defeat him, he would answer any question he wanted. Chunghu was incredibly confident, believing it was absolutely impossible for him to lose. After the two clashed for a bit, Chunghu was slammed face first into the dirt. He demanded a rematch. Jaehwan sighed. "The winner is already clear, let's just stop here." But Chunghu stubbornly refused to give up, insisting he hadn't even used his ultimate technique yet. If he were to actually use it, Jaehwan would definitely be dead. He was just holding back. Jaehwan was completely speechless. How many times is this old man going to repeat the exact same thing? Chunghu shouted from down in the crater, asking Jaehwan how old he was. Jaehwan estimated he was around 60. Chunghu snapped in frustration, yelling that he was already 1,000 years old. There was no way a brat who had only practiced thrusting for 65 years could beat him, someone who had been slashing for 1,000 years. Even though Chunghu had practiced his slash for 1,000 years, to Jaehwan, it looked like he had only been at it for 15. His pride deeply wounded, Chunghu lunged out of the crater, sword in hand, launching another slash. Jaehwan raised his sword to counter. The moment they clashed, Jaehwan was pushed back. Chung-Hu found himself intrigued by Jaehwan's technique and asked what its name was. Jaehwan nonchalantly replied, "Normal thrust." Chung-Hu was completely speechless at the name. With a name like that, who would ever guess it was an incredibly powerful technique? Jaehwan gripped his sword tightly, bracing himself to unleash an even more powerful thrust. Chung-Hu stood there, completely frozen. Right now, the person standing before him was no longer just the ordinary Jaehwan, but the sole king of chaos. He could never forget the absolute terror of facing that king, not for as long as he lived. Chung-Hu broke out in a cold sweat. He doubted he could ever cut through something like that. While it might not match the raw power of the Soul King, it was still an incredibly devastating attack. Just as Jaehwan lowered his stance, gearing up to charge, Chung-Hu suddenly stopped him. Meanwhile, in the fifth zone of the Great Lands, the Steel Territory, Hu, the Lord of Steel, also known as the Unyielding Steel, listened to his subordinate's report about the all-knowing monarch's movements in chaos. Hu frowned. Aren't all the monarchs of the Great Lands bound by a covenant that forbids them from interfering in the affairs of chaos? Feeling the heavy pressure, the subordinate bowed his head low. Hu stared at the screen, which showed a video of a certain young man clearing the 99th floor all by himself. He couldn't wrap his head around it. Is this video even real? It has to be fake. Actually, sir, the item in that video belongs to the all-knowing monarch, which links directly to the 9th zone. After refusing to complete the tutorial mode, the guy in the video literally smashed through the tower roof and took off with the item. And he has been off the grid ever since. Hu couldn't believe his ears. But wasn't there a demon keeping watch on the 100th floor? Well, that demon is dead, sir. To make matters worse, Hu received word that the all-knowing monarch had been meddling in the affairs of chaos for a very long time. It turned out that one of the 10 clans in chaos had been in constant contact with the all-knowing monarch. Hu pondered for a moment before ordering his subordinate to send a message to chaos. Assemble 10 elite first-class golden warriors and 2 level 5 descending walkers. He wanted to go down and see what was really going on with his own eyes. But thinking of chaos made Hu worry about Chung-Hu. That old man would have lived a long life if he weren't so damn stubborn. Hu could only hope Chung-Hu was doing okay. Meanwhile, Chung-Hu was being run ragged by Jaehwan, feeling like his soul was about to leave his body any second. He still refused to accept it. How could Jaehwan pull off something so insane after only a few dozen thrusts? But when Jaehwan did the math, he figured he had practiced it about 10 billion times. Chung-Hu scoffed at that. 10 billion? You'd have to skip eating and sleeping, and somehow thrust 8 times a second. Who on earth can do that? Jaehwan simply replied, "Actually, I can thrust 100 times a second. And besides, who said that movement is limited to a sword?" Chung-Hu's eyes widened as a memory suddenly clicked. The sharp, alien energy he had felt from Jaehwan since their very first meeting wasn't actually energy. Nor was it some sort of battle spirit. It was pure bloodlust, driven by an ambition to cleanse the entire world. This was the ultimate thrust. Chung-Hu finally understood. Jaehwan had literally turned himself into the thrust itself, and he was still piercing through this world. Even at this very moment, Jaehwan stood up. He wasn't lying. He really had executed that thrust 10 billion times. Jaehwan pulled out a piece of paper and waved it in front of Chung-Hu's face, asking if he still remembered it. This was the contract they had signed before their duel. The loser had to grant one wish to the winner. Jaehwan's request was simple. All he wanted was for Chung-Hu to answer his questions honestly. That was it. With that settled, the two of them walked out of the training room. Jaehwan asked him, "So, what exactly is a master's tower?" Chung-Hu strolled along, explaining that these towers are built from nightmares. Those towers are ranked from F-class to S-class. The masters are those who manage to construct an S-class tower during their apprenticeship, becoming master artisans at a very young age. But just because a master built a tower doesn't automatically make it a master's tower. Only those special towers created completely independent of a seed can truly be called a master's tower. No one knows why these towers are built in the first place, and honestly, nobody in this world has any clue what the hell those masters are thinking. Everyone says the masters are the ones pulling the strings behind the truth of the world. But one thing is clear. Every now and then, an awakener emerges from those who manage to clear a master's tower. Chung-Hu was also someone who had conquered a master's tower. He came from the 4th tower of the master, Melville, a place notoriously known as the Moby Dick of the world. A massive white whale would spawn right on the 1st floor of the tower, relentlessly hunting down humans. Looking back, the difficulty of that tower might sound like a joke, but to Chung-Hu at the time, It was an absolute nightmare. Countless martial artists from the martial kingdom lost their lives. For him to actually clear that tower was nothing short of a miracle. Chung-Hu figured Jaehwan must have come from a master's tower as well, so he asked who its master was. Jaehwan replied that he believed it was Mulak. Hearing that name, Chung-Hu froze. He never imagined an awakener could actually conquer Mulak's tower. He knew Mulak because the two of them had traveled together in the past. Chatting away, they strolled out of town and headed toward Claire's pub for a cold beer. Jaehwan stared silently at the meat skewer on his plate. Chung-Hu could read his mind after all. It was bizarre that food even existed in a world where people never felt hungry. Chung-Hu chugged a mouthful of beer and stared down into his cup. Chaos was once actually a blessed world. It was a place where souls, exhausted from the wars in the Great Land, could finally find sweet rest. People reclaimed their lives after being freed from the endless cycle of being warriors. They could finally lay down their weapons, and bards could sing about peace instead of war. Suddenly, a noisy fight broke out nearby. Jaehwan glanced over. It looked like a typical drunken brawl, nothing that had anything to do with him. He took another sip of his drink, but it tasted just like water. People in chaos never got drunk, never starved, and never aged. They were only pretending to be drunk. In a paradise like this, people actually began to crave the exact opposite. They missed a real life that included death. So they started acting as if they were truly alive. A life where they would die if they didn't eat, and get drunk if they drank alcohol. A life where they had real bodies and beating hearts. Just as they were lost in deep thought, Chung-Hu suddenly shouted out. One day, those drunkards started doing something new. An expedition crew was formed, dreaming of the impossible and gathering people to reclaim their real lives. That was the Abyss expedition. Jaehwan didn't understand. Of all places, why on earth did they choose the Abyss? Chung-Hu slumped back in his chair. Those people wanted to find the resurrection fruit, which grows on the branches of the Tree of Imagery, at the very depths of the Abyss. The only way for the deceased in this world to come back to life is to eat that fruit. The Abyss expedition was an alliance formed specifically to find that fruit. At that time, Chung-Hu had already awakened, and he was at an age where he feared absolutely nothing. Back then, he was only 150 years old. Mulak was also a member of the expeditionary force. He was the captain leading the crew, a truly remarkable individual. Chung-Hu recalled his conversation with Mulak. The two of them had even thrown punches at each other before. Mulak was a nightmare who was supposed to be completely emotionless, but he actually regretted creating the towers. The reason Mulak went looking for the Tree of Imagery and entered the Abyss was all because of a single tower. That tower would put an end to all cultivation, which was why he joined the expedition. Chung-Hu didn't know what happened to the expedition after that, since he fell behind and only made it to the entrance of the Abyss. But Mulak did reach the top of the Tree of Imagery, because the fruits began falling down from its branches. Thanks to that, every single member of the expedition was able to return to chaos with their hands full of the fruit. Jaehwan suddenly felt like something wasn't adding up. If old Chung-Hu had actually gotten the resurrection fruit, why was he still here in chaos? Just then, Keely walked over carrying some food. She immediately scolded Chung-Hu for not telling the story right. The expedition actually failed. They only succeeded as far as getting the fruit, Chung-Hu recounted gloomily. By the time they returned to chaos, the monarchs and clan leaders of the Great Lands were already waiting at the exit. Since those cowards didn't have the guts to go to the Abyss themselves, 4 fortress lords and 10 high priests from the expedition ended up fighting them, but they were no match for those bastards. The power gap was just too massive, and the monarchs and clan leaders completely outclassed them. So, their fruits were stolen. Those bastards have been using the stolen fruits to resurrect themselves every time they die, and they've been doing this for 900 years now. It's like they have a whole separate facility built just for them, a place known as the Palace of Resurrection. The monarchs and the 5 great clans take turns resurrecting whenever they kick the bucket. Right from the start, the ones allowed to live were already decided. They're the only ones who get to live a normal life. Jaehwan blinked, finally understanding everything. That's why the people here are so indifferent. They all know that the real life they desire and the resurrection fruit itself are things they will never, ever get. Jaehwan was about to ask more, but he saw that Chung-Hu had already collapsed on the table, dead asleep. After pretending to be drunk for 1,000 years, he now gets totally wasted without even realizing it. Kelly continued sharing what she had heard. After the expedition ended, no one ever saw Mulak again. He apparently said something before vanishing. Something along the lines of "it was a failure, but I didn't fail." Just then, another visitor dropped by. It was James. He came to thank Jaehwan for saving Carlton. Jaehwan just stood there blankly, having absolutely no idea who this guy was. James sighed and told him that next time he visits Gorgon, he should enter through the north gate. Since he knew his face now, he wouldn't bother checking his ID papers. Of course, this had to be kept a secret from Carlton. James chuckled smugly. After they sat for a bit, the captain of the Fiendslayers, Jaehwan, came rushing in out of breath. His face was pale as he announced that something terrible had happened. Jaehwan slung Chung-Hu over his shoulder and dashed off with Jaehwan, staring at the black smoke rising from the fortress. He had already guessed it, the master of the fortress had likely fallen into a state no different from a dead man. The pressure of the spirit energy was 10 times stronger than any other dead man he had encountered during the day. He could feel it radiating intensely. That energy was radiating from deep within the fortress, or more accurately, from right beneath it. Jaehwan couldn't help but think about the plea from Jurin, the fortress commander. The man had begged him to save the master of this fortress. Jaehwan quickly realized that the fortress master, who was currently undergoing corruption, had suddenly lost control. Normally, this would only happen once a week, but today, something was seriously wrong. Heinz warned Jaehwan, making sure he didn't mistake the fortress master for some kind-hearted soul. Before struggling against this corruption, that person was a living legend because he was one of the few who accompanied the Saint of Medicine, Cheung-heo, on the expedition into the abyss. Heinz suggested that Jaehwan perform the dead cut in Cheung-heo's place, since the old man was fast asleep. Jaehwan hesitated, knowing he was only mimicking Cheung-heo's technique. His own dead cut wasn't nearly as good as the master's. It would have been a different story if he had been properly trained by the old man himself. Meanwhile, the dark smoke pouring from the castle grew even more intense. Right then, the commanders of the Tower of Ruin and the Tower of Despair appeared, blocking their path. Having received orders to let no one pass, the only authority they answered to was the Gyumshan sect, completely ignoring the corrupting fortress master trapped inside. The commanders of the Tower of Ruin and the Tower of Despair lunged downward to attack. Heinz shoved Jaehwan aside, shouting, "Get out of the way!" He then took on both of them by himself. Jaehwan calmly watched and murmured, "Wow. He's actually pretty good." Heinz blocked a sword with one hand and a warhammer with the other. He never expected spies from the Gyumshan sect to have successfully infiltrated the fortress. Knocking their weapons back, Heinz warned them to think carefully, saying that if they backed down now, the fortress master would surely show them mercy. The commander of the Tower of Despair sneered, "What kind of fortress master is that thing rotting away underground anyway? That guy can't even control his own power, let alone tell good from evil. That's definitely not the paradise they wanted to serve." The commander of the Tower of Despair spat back, asking if Heinz was seriously still following that thing after seeing what it had become. Heinz held on to his unwavering belief that the master would return. Refusing to waste any more words, the commander of the Tower of Ruin seized the opening and swung his hammer at Heinz from behind. Unable to dodge in time, Heinz took a direct hit and flew back 8 meters, his hair disheveled and his clothes torn to shreds. He coughed up white fluid. Those two were only 4th stage adapters. In theory, there was no way they could defeat a 5th stage adapter, even in a 2-on-1 fight. How on earth were they pulling this off? He couldn't even track their speed anymore. This was way beyond normal improvement. Something was extremely dangerous. Just as Heinz was about to scream at Jaehwan to run, the young man tossed the sleeping Cheung-heo right into his arms. "Let me handle this," Jaehwan said. The commander of the Tower of Ruin looked at Jaehwan and asked to confirm, "Can you really perform the dead cut?" Jaehwan neither confirmed nor denied it. The two commanders communicated telepathically, silently sizing up Jaehwan. Outwardly, he didn't look like an adapter at all. They weren't sure if he was just bluffing. Who in their right mind would try to perform a dead cut with a sword like that? Jaehwan's build was less than half of the Tower of Ruin commanders, looking like he'd dropped dead from a single gentle shove. Little did they know, Jaehwan heard every single word of their whispering. With blinding speed, he flashed behind the commander of the Tower of Ruin and delivered a devastating punch right to his face. Before the commander could even utter a sound, he was sent flying, crashing straight through the stone wall. Seeing this, the commander of the Tower of Despair rushed forward to attack Jaehwan and save his ally, but he ended up getting utterly wrecked, his armor shattering into pieces. The commander of the Tower of Despair struggled to keep his balance and stay on his feet. He swung his spear wildly at Jaehwan, but the young man easily slipped past the strike. Unleashing a flurry of rapid spear spins, the commander unleashed a relentless assault. Jaehwan leaped backward to dodge, but he could feel that same powerful energy from before. Was it a heart fueled by pure hatred, or what? The commander of the Tower of Despair growled. Do you honestly think a nobody like you can save the fortress, master? Yet beneath that bravado, Jaehwan could feel his sheer terror. These guys actually planned to betray each other with such pathetic skills? It was absolutely laughable. Jaehwan told them he had no intention of saving the fortress master, as that job belonged to the old geezer Cheong Hyo over there, but taking care of you two punks? That's child's play. Stepping firmly on the spear, Jaehwan vaulted into the air and drove his sword straight down. Meanwhile, Jurin, the fortress commander, hurried down to the basement with his men to assess the situation. He swallowed hard, sweating. It hadn't even been a full day since the Saint of Medicine performed the dead cut, so why was the master already deteriorating like this? Jurin had personally checked this morning and saw that the corruption into a dead had halted and his energy had stabilized. So why on earth was he going wild now? Just when a sliver of hope appeared that the master could be cured, this disaster had to strike. If they could have just held on for one more month, they might have saved him. Right now, Jaehwan's dead cut was only a rough imitation, and unlike Mino, the master's state of collapse was far too advanced. Anyone else would have turned into a dead a long time ago. But with just one more month of practice, Jaehwan's dead cut might actually become viable. Jurin gritted his teeth, turning his gaze toward the subordinates standing behind him. One of these guys has to know about Jaehwan. He already figured out early on that there was a traitor in their midst. A while back, the castle lord wanted to meet someone who could manipulate spirit contamination, so he went out to inspect the troops. But by the time he returned, his spirit was completely contaminated. He was barely human anymore, looking like a total monster. And one of the witnesses to that event is right here, Maihan. Yurin was starting to get highly suspicious of him. Meanwhile, Maihan was demanding that everyone stay on high alert, calling it an extreme emergency. If they delayed any longer, it would be the end of Gorgon Fortress. Yurin froze in disbelief. They couldn't perform the Fiend Slash without the Divine Doctor here. Did they really want the Castle Lord to die? Maihan knew that even if they all teamed up, they wouldn't stand a chance against the Castle Lord. So he decided to perform the Dead Man Seal instead. If they waited any longer, it would be too late. At the very least, they had to preserve the Castle Lord's spiritual energy using the Dead Man Seal. Maihan glared at Yurin, pressuring him to make a choice. Right then, the captain of the Dark Unit walked in, carrying some sort of chest. Yurin stood frozen in absolute disbelief. The captain of the Dark Unit, a member of the command staff, was actually a traitor, and the chest he was holding contained Jaehwan's dark crystal. Maihan immediately confronted Yurin, demanding to know why he was hiding and monopolizing such an important item. This was the very future of Gorgon. Taking advantage of the situation, Maihan aggressively accused Yurin, asking if he wanted to turn the Castle Lord into a greater fiend. Even a mid-level fiend was a catastrophic threat to Gorgon. A greater fiend was a nightmare that ruled over countless other fiends, bringing total destruction to everywhere they went. Yurin clenched his fists, unable to argue. The Castle Lord was losing his mind, and the Divine Doctor was nowhere to be found. Maihan's point actually made sense right now, but Yurin still felt like something was horribly wrong. Performing the Fiend Slash wasn't something just anyone could pull off. Even with the Dark Crystal, the Dead Man Seal was a secret art of the Sixfold Clan. Was Maihan planning to bring one of their members here? Maihan told Yurin not to worry. He had already summoned people who had mastered that secret art. These guys weren't even from the Sixfold Clan, but they could at least cast the seal. Yurin watched as a group of cloaked figures filed in one after another. This was bad. They were totally screwed. If the Dead Man's Seal was cast this way, the Castle Lord's spiritual energy would be sealed inside the Dark Crystal. Since energy couldn't be inherited in chaos, if someone managed to get their hands on a Dark Crystal containing the Castle Lord's spiritual energy, they would basically inherit all of his power and become the new master of Gorgon. Cold sweat dripped down Yurin's face. If Gorgon fell into the wrong hands, they were all dead. Yurin watched as a man in a black cloak pulled the crystal out of the chest. He couldn't believe anyone besides Jaehwan, especially someone not from the Sixfold Clan, could handle the Dark Crystal. Yurin's face paled as he remembered the Castle Lord's previous words. The person who could manipulate spirit contamination was right here. From the moment the Castle Lord's spirit first began to collapse 6 months ago to his complete madness today, was all of this actually part of Outer Commander Maihan's master plan? Panicking, Yurin urgently ordered his subordinates to stop Maihan, but nobody moved a muscle. Desperate and defeated, Yurin fell to his knees. Every single one of them had betrayed him. There was absolutely nothing he could do. He felt incredibly guilty. His own complacency had cost him the chance to protect Gorgon. Tears streamed down Yurin's face, completely helpless to stop what was happening. Suddenly, the ceiling crashed down, scattering the crowd below. Jaehwan and Carlton dropped down from above, looking incredibly badass. The Dark Unit commander clicked his tongue. Maihan screamed, demanding to know who Jaehwan was and how he dared to barge in. Carlton threw down the two commanders of the Tower of Fall and the Tower of Despair, shouting at Maihan to stop. Treason is a crime, punishable by death. Maihan glared at the commander of the Tower of Fall. Instantly, the man's face distorted and exploded. Maihan smirked with ultimate confidence. Now that the evidence was literally blown away, he had absolutely nothing to fear. Furious, Carlton ordered his men to draw their weapons and fight. This was a full-blown rebellion. If the Dead Man Seal succeeded, everything Maihan planned would become a reality. But the moment Carlton tried to step forward, his own men pointed their swords at him. They had already sworn loyalty to the Golden Sky clan, demanding Carlton stay put until the Castle Lord's sealing was complete. Carlton roared, "You cowardly traitors!" Jaehwan calmly assessed the situation and proposed a deal to Yurin. As agreed, he would save the Castle Lord, but only if Gorgon Fortress protected him in return. But now, Gorgon has broken its promise to him. This place can no longer protect him, which means the terms of their agreement have to change. Jaehwan boldly declares that he will save the Fortress Master and slaughter every single traitor on the other side. In return, they must hand Dr. Chung-hyo over to him, and he will launch the conquest of the Abyss once again. Everyone here will help him make it happen. Hearing this, everyone is left completely speechless, while Maihan finds the whole thing absolutely ridiculous. He had heard rumors about someone taking down Danya, a powerful dead man, in just one blow. He thought it was just a lie, but it turns out to be the absolute truth. Since that is the case, he will have to go all out to put Jaehwan down. Mahan orders his goons to jump him, surrounding Jaehwan from all sides. But Jaehwan suddenly channels his inner hidden leaf ninja. He whips out daggers and lets them fly everywhere. With his god-tier skills, his throws hit like a truck, completely tearing the enemy formation to shreds. The overconfident guys leading the charge get hit first, immediately getting put out of commission. Still, the rest of them keep throwing themselves at him. Jaehwan realizes these guys just won't stop attacking him. Sighing, he mutters, "Why are you all so eager to meet your maker?" With that, Jaehwan unleashes a normal thrust right at Mahan. Mahan tries to block it with his sword, but he completely miscalculated. There is no way he can stop a strike like that. Out of options, Mahan is forced to redirect the attack, sending it crashing into the wall right next to the Fortress Master. Mahan breaks out in a cold sweat. If he had been stubborn enough to try and block that head-on, he would be history by now. Meanwhile, the other enemies start using telepathy to discuss their next move. If they cannot keep the Fiend sealed, they will have to resort to Plan B, which is deploying the Black Cloud, even if it means slaughtering everyone in Gorgon. Jaehwan hears every word, and his face goes dark. He points straight at Mahan, giving the old man a mini heart attack. He knows Mahan is the external commander of Gorgon and the chief elder of the Golden Sky sect. Jaehwan has no idea why they want to trigger a soul collapse, but he knows one thing for sure: he absolutely loves people like them. Because with people like them around, it makes destroying this world so much easier. Jaehwan raises his sword, unleashing a massive, overwhelming aura. Mahan and his lackeys can sense just how terrifying this move is. They quickly deploy their forces, doing everything in their power to block Jaehwan. He points his sword straight toward the sky, forming a massive beam of light that rains destructive energy down on them. Mahan and his group get absolutely obliterated. Watching this, Jurin feels a sudden spark of hope. He recalls the words of the Fortress Master, that the people of Gorgon need hope, an overwhelming hope that will never waver, no matter what they face. Jurin can hardly believe that he is sensing that very hope from someone like Jaehwan, a guy who openly talks about destroying the world. Mahan gets sliced clean in half like Gojo. Breathing his last before turning to dust, he uses his remaining strength to curse Jaehwan as a monster. Jaehwan thrusts his sword right into Mahan's face, making him vanish instantly. Right at that moment, Zahir arrives on the scene. Meanwhile, Chung-hyo is still out cold, showing no signs of waking up. Jaehwan just picks him up and hurls him straight into the wall. Chung-hyo screams in agonizing pain, complaining that his already bad back is completely ruined. Suddenly, the system blares a red alert. The target's spirit collapse has exceeded 99.9%. Transformation into a dead man is beginning. The The system starts calculating the target's threat level. After failing to determine the exact threat level, the system predicts the arrival of an extremely dangerous fiend. Gorgon Fortress's automatic warning system is now activated. Violent tremors shake the entire Gorgon Fortress. Citizens flee in panic as soldiers rush to evacuate everyone to safety. A massive amount of dark energy begins leaking inside the fortress, prompting Cheongheo to finally lock in. He tells Jurin and Zahir to head to the evacuation zone immediately, leaving only him and Jaehwan behind. Understanding the danger, the two of them quickly retreat. Cheongheo draws his sword, a brand new blade he just managed to get his hands on, and gets ready to use it. Without wasting any time, Cheongheo begins drawing his purification patterns. The fortress master is an incredibly dear friend to him, after all. They shared countless precious memories together. As Cheongheo performs the technique, he explains it to Jaehwan, making sure the young man takes it to heart. Bringing back forgotten memories is the true purpose of the fiend slash. If their minds are flooded with those memories, they can at least survive the worst-case scenario. But as Cheongheo is drawing, he notices a group of dark, shadowy figures appearing right behind the fortress master. They cackle creepily, staring at Cheongheo with terrifying eyes. Cheongheo begins to tremble, realizing that whatever this is, it is definitely not the Lord. Something absolutely horrifying is coming. The fortress master snaps open his eyes, breaks his chains, and floats up into the air. His eyes are completely hollow, and his body is extremely emaciated, literally nothing but skin and bones. Shaking with fear, Cheongheo knows for certain this is not the fortress master he once knew. The Lord then slowly lands back on the ground. Instantly, a chilling sensation runs down both Jaehwan and Cheongheo's spines as a raw, primal dread washes over them. The dark shadow behind the Lord stares intensely at the two of them, muttering, "Well, what a surprise. It never imagined it could enter this world using a body like this. After all, even this great man has ended up turning into a fiend." The dark shadow laughs maniacally, asking Cheongheo why he is still here in chaos. Didn't he already find what he wanted in the abyss 9 years ago? Hearing that voice, Cheongheo breaks out into a cold sweat. This being is the master of the Palace of Death, located right in the heart of chaos, and the only one who can open the gate to the abyss. Even after using doubt, Jaehwan is unable to identify the dark shadow, the Soul King catastrophe. It is similar to a ghoul, yet not quite one. So what exactly is it? There is no way to know. With a wave of his hand, the master of the Palace of Death releases an incredibly oppressive aura, making it hard for both of them to even stand. He repeatedly questions Cheongheo, asking why he is still lingering around. Does he actually want to protect this world? Cheongheo collapses to the ground. With just a snap of his fingers, the entity easily shattered the barrier Cheongheo had put up. Cackling wildly, the master of the Palace of Death locks eyes with Jaehwan, muttering that this kid is quite interesting. A human who has completely awakened, yet still possesses a pure heart. Cheongheo remains frozen, unable to even stand up. The master of the Tower of Death's unique authority is possession. He must have taken over the Fortress Lord's body through this power. If that is the case, then what stands before him now is just a clone. It is unbelievable that a mere clone could exert such terrifying pressure. Jaehwan knows Cheongheo cannot get back up, so now it is his turn to step onto the stage. Finding this hilarious, the master of the Tower of Death glares at Jaehwan with a mocking challenge. Cheongheo desperately grabs Jaehwan's sleeve to stop him, warning him that there is nothing they can do in this state. Even Mulak could not lay a finger on the Soul King. Cutting him off, Jaehwan tells Cheongheo not to worry. He is absolutely certain he can defeat the monster in front of him. Hearing this, the master of the Tower of Death, the Soul King, laughs like a maniac. He hacks up a clump of black threads from his throat, grabbing them and drawing them out into a sword, ready for battle. Cheongheo instantly recognizes the weapon the Soul King just drew. It is the Void Sword, the terrifying weapon that turned half of the expedition team into ghouls in the blink of an eye. He cannot believe this trump card is actually being played. The Soul King lunges forward, closing the distance, but Jaehwan steps back to dodge. The Soul King remarks that he has seen eyes just like Jaehwan's before. He knows Jaehwan wants to reach the abyss, and it excites him to no end. So there are still those in this world who want to reach its very end. The Soul King grabs Jaehwan's head with one hand and swings his sword down, but Jaehwan flips away to dodge and counters with a blow that snaps the Soul King's arm in half. Jaehwan backs away to gain some distance. Rubbing his face where he was just grabbed, Jaehwan thought he had completely severed the Soul King's arm. But in less than 3 seconds, that very same hand lunges forward again to seize him. Luckily, his quick reflexes allow him to dodge in time, though he still takes a hit to his bicep, tearing away a chunk of flesh. Gripping his sword tightly, Jaehwan spins around to attack, cutting the Soul King clean in half, yet the monster remains completely unfazed. His severed body parts float in the air before slowly reattaching themselves. Leaning on his sword, the Soul King begins to preach once more, claiming that corruption is ultimately a disease caused by time. With just a single scratch from the Void Sword, countless millennia will flash by. The soul, unable to withstand the passage of time, will age, decay, and inevitably turn into a ghoul. As the wound on his arm rapidly rots and decays, Jaehwan does not hesitate for a second, using his sword to slice his own arm off. The Soul King gasps in surprise. He never expected Jaehwan to sever his corrupted soul so casually, marveling at his sheer willpower. But that will not be enough. The Soul King spits out another cluster of swords. Several swords sprout from his body and shoot toward Jaehwan. Seeing them heading straight for Chongheo, Jaehwan steps in front to deflect the incoming blades, but 2 of them still manage to pierce his remaining arm and 1 of his legs. Without hesitation, he pulls the swords out and carves away the decaying flesh from his arm and leg. The Soul King charges in with his sword once more, and Jaehwan raises his own blade to clash against him. The shockwave from the impact sends Chongheo tumbling backward. If this fight keeps going, Jaehwan will not be able to hold out much longer. No matter how many times he uses doubt, he still cannot find a single weakness in his opponent. On top of that, these strange golden objects keep flashing before his eyes, throwing off his concentration. Jaehwan recalls what Chongheo told him before. Every awakener possesses a unique world, born from a keyword they received when they awakened something akin to their deepest desire or emotion. A powerful awakener can even harbor numerous living beings within their own world. Tightening his grip on his sword, Jaehwan decides to gamble one more time. He parries the Soul King's blade and takes a quick step back. Jaehwan activates Lunar Eye. The surrounding space warps, shifting into a blazing crimson. This is hell, the very world he has always lived in. Another world forged from helplessness and rage. A blood-red eye manifests in the sky, glaring down at the Soul King. The old monster is truly amazed, seeing a human's ideal world for the very first time. As he opens his mouth to hack up more threads, Jaehwan blitzes forward at extreme speed, smashing the old man's jaw. But the Soul King immediately responds by releasing a massive tangle of vines. Binding Jaehwan tight, the old monster shoves his face close and sticks out his tongue. Jaehwan just keeps charging forward blindly, with no idea how to put an end to all of this. Soul King Catastrophe grabs Jaehwan by the face and slams him violently into the dirt, shattering the ground and triggering a massive rock slide. Stomping on the motionless Jaehwan's chest, Soul King Catastrophe grins. It has been a long time since he met someone so utterly consumed by hatred, someone who just refuses to back down. He pulls another Void Sword from his body, aiming it straight at Jaehwan, ready to drive it through him. But just as the blade is about to pierce his chest, Jaehwan snaps his eyes open. With a swift swing, he slices Soul King Catastrophe right in half. The old monster's eyes widen in sheer shock, completely clueless about what just happened. Tossing his coat aside, Jaehwan knows the real fun is just getting started. Even as Soul King Catastrophe's severed body rolls on the ground, the monster remains ridiculously confident. He claims Jaehwan can't even leave a scratch on him. Rejoining his severed halves, the monster morphs into a colossal, grotesque giant, even bigger than before. Catastrophe swings his massive sword at Jaehwan. After a quick dodge, the monster immediately lashes out with his other hand, swatting Jaehwan. Sent flying into the wall, Jaehwan coughs up blood as Catastrophe rushes in, relentless, to press the attack. Reacting just in time, Jaehwan slips behind the giant and drives his sword forward. The monster extends his neck, easily dodging the blow, and lets out a sinister cackle. He brags about how he has spent ages observing the creations of this world to build it. He mocks how every living thing tries to climb to the top of the tree of illusion just to satisfy their curiosity. And he knows Jaehwan is doing the exact same thing, desperately searching for his own answers about this world. He asks Jaehwan what answer he is looking for, but Jaehwan stays dead silent, focusing solely on defending and counterattacking. Catastrophe starts rambling in a dramatic monologue, continuously guessing what burning questions Jaehwan wants answered. Meanwhile, the brutal clash continues. Catastrophe is completely overwhelming Jaehwan, who honestly has no clue what gibberish this guy has been spouting this entire time. But then, A wave of familiarity hits Jaehwan. This situation. He has definitely been through this before. He thinks back to that monster. The big torrent from back then. Suddenly, it clicks. The thing Jaehwan is fighting right now is nothing but a clone connected to a host body. Taking a deep breath, he thrusts his sword forward, blowing catastrophe into a million pieces. Yet, the monster's voice keeps rambling endlessly. Completely arrogant about his infinite regeneration, the shattered pieces try to snap at Jaehwan. But Jaehwan seizes the perfect moment and leaps high into the air. His guess was spot on. There it is, the guiding thread, just like before. If this thing is just a clone, then there has to be a physical link to the main body. Gripping his sword tight, Jaehwan drives it straight down into that connection. Catastrophe's eyes bug out in horror. No way. This is Chung-Hoo's ultimate skill, vaporizing his very essence and making it impossible to regenerate. Just before fading away, Catastrophe leaves a final warning, telling Jaehwan he will be waiting at the entrance of the abyss. Left alone, Jaehwan collapses to the ground, panting heavily. He realizes he needs to become much stronger. Regular thrusts won't cut it anymore. He needs a broader arsenal, especially a powerful slash technique. Slashes are perfect for wiping out large armies, but against a single, incredibly powerful foe, the wide area of effect actually dilutes the damage, making it way less effective. He only used it this time as a distraction to buy some precious time. Jaehwan needs a completely new skill, a specialized technique designed purely for one-on-one combat against monstrously powerful foes. By the time Carlton and Yurin rush back, the entire area has been reduced to absolute rubble. Chung-Hoo is completely knocked out, but the Fortress Lord has finally regained consciousness, calling out to Jaehwan. Drawing him close, the old lord whispers that he has something to say. He opens up, admitting that his soul had already corrupted, turning him into a fiend. He was bloodthirsty, yet he never stopped watching Jaehwan's every move. He is deeply grateful that the young warrior stood up to fight Soul King Catastrophe. Gripping Jaehwan's hand with what little strength he has left, the Fortress Lord weakly whispers that it is time for Gorgon to change. With those final words, he channels a warm, golden light directly into Jaehwan. Mysterious symbols begin to etch themselves onto the young man's arm. The Fortress Lord closes his eyes with a peaceful smile, finding Jaehwan strangely familiar. He can feel the warmth of the memories residing deep within the boy's soul. As the old lord slowly crumbles into dust, a gentle smile remains on his face. He silently pleads for Jaehwan never to let the hope in his heart burn out. Just then, a crowd of soldiers arrives at the scene. Dragging his battered body up, Jaehwan slowly stands. As soon as the soldiers catch sight of the mark on his arm, they immediately drop to their knees. Tears well up in Yurin's eyes as everything finally clicks. This was the Fortress Lord's ultimate wish to pass the mantle to a new ruler. The kneeling crowd bows deeply, calling Jaehwan the new master of Gorgon. 2 days later, the Fortress of Gorgon slowly begins the long process of rebuilding. But Jaehwan is having none of it, flatly refusing to take the throne. He wants nothing to do with being the master of some fortress, telling them to give the job to literally anyone else. Left with no choice, Yurin reminds Jaehwan of his promise. He reminds him that he had promised to save the Fortress Lord and eliminate the traitor. But now that the Lord has passed, it is Jaehwan's responsibility to step up as the leader of Gorgon. Jaehwan can feel a massive headache coming on. How on earth did he get dragged into this mess? He has absolutely no time to waste sitting around this fortress. He needs to reach the abyss. He tries to pass the master position to someone else. But Yurin shuts him down immediately. That is impossible. If he does that, the Fortress of Gorgon will never recognize them. You see, Gorgon in this context refers to the living mark etched onto Jaehwan's arm. That is exactly why the position of master is not something that can just be handed off to whoever he wants. The master of Gorgon can only change when the current master is no longer in this world. Yurin tossed a thick stack of documents onto the desk, telling Jaehwan he had to finish going through them by the end of the day. Since Jaehwan was still brand new to the role of Castle Lord, Yurin had included some notes and guides to help him get adjusted. Jaehwan pulled out a sheet of paper and began to read. It was the laws of Gorgon. These rules were absolutely ridiculous. No wonder everyone had nothing but good things to say about the previous Castle Lord. After showing Jaehwan where the office supplies were kept in the drawers, Yurin left to attend to other matters, telling him to call if he needed anything. Jaehwan slid the drawer open and noticed a crumpled ball of paper inside. On it, the words, "The 17th ruler," were scribbled. Suddenly, the paper ball began to twitch and folded itself into the shape of a tiny old man. It cheerfully greeted Jaehwan. Even though it had no idea who he was, it explained that finding this meant he was now the new ruler. And, of course, he must be wondering how to govern Gorgon Fortress. Jaehwan could only break into a sweat as he watched the little paper figure ramble on and on. Paper magic, huh? Or was it some kind of paper doll created from pure spirit power? The paper figure continued its relentless speech, advising him that a ruler's only real job was to seek out fun. Apparently, a great ruler was someone who spent their time enjoying life. Security was best left to the guard division, while internal and external issues should be handled by the Foreign Affairs Department. The castle lord didn't actually have to do a single thing. After all, that was a long-standing tradition. According to the data the paper doll had compiled, half of the previous rulers had overworked themselves to death. The constant stress wore down both their bodies and souls, ensuring they never lived long lives. This wasn't just advice for Jaehwan, it was for the sake of Gorgon itself. It pleaded with him not to be greedy, to avoid trying to change things, and to never push himself to the point of exhaustion. Everyone here knew that this world was incredibly resistant to change. That was why it was better for Jaehwan to just maintain the status quo and make only tiny, gradual adjustments. Rather than making decisions based on the majority's opinions, he should do whatever his own heart and will dictated. This was a hard-learned lesson from the former castle lord, who repeatedly stressed this point, begging him not to let greed take over, and to never try to change things that were simply beyond his power. The paper figure added that the only good ruler in chaos was one who did absolutely nothing. Having delivered its message, it crumpled back into a lifeless ball of paper, leaving Jaehwan lost in thought. He was finally beginning to understand what the role of a ruler truly meant in this world. It was an existence designed to crush hope just to survive. A system that actively prevented any change to keep the status quo for generations. Noticing his long silence, Yurin asked him what was on his mind. Jaehwan had made up his mind. He was going to abolish the position of Gorgon's ruler. Yurin stared at him, completely lost. Jaehwan then asked, "What is a fortress?" Yurin found the question a bit bizarre, but he answered seriously anyway. A fortress is a citadel, and a citadel is a military structure designed to protect allies from their enemies. Jaehwan pressed further. What if there are no more enemies? What happens if no one ever tries to invade the fortress again? Yurin froze as Jaehwan's underlying point slowly began to dawn on him. If that were the case, the fortress would have no reason to exist, and without a fortress, there would be no need for a ruler. But to Yurin, the idea of a fortress with no enemies sounded completely impossible. Jaehwan confidently declared that it would be possible because he was going to unify all of chaos. Traditional funerals did not exist in chaos. Instead, they held a soul ceremony to cheerfully send off those who had faded away for good. While a funeral is a ritual to mourn and remember the dead, the soul ceremony is a ritual meant to erase them. During this event, the story of the departed soul is retold over and over again. It is the final gift chaos can offer to those who have departed from this world. Yurin took the stage to lead the ceremony. The former lord's name was Emil Groshek, and they were unable to give him a proper burial. This ceremony was the only thing they could do to honor his memory, and the crowd listened in solemn silence. Standing by the window, Jaehwan listened. Upon hearing the former lord's name, he finally understood the true identity of the strange old man who had passed the title of ruler down to him. Jaehwan could hear the murmurs of the crowd around him. Many were highly skeptical about whether he was fit to be their new lord. Jaehwan's attention was drawn to a nearby presence. It was a veiled woman who gave him a subtle smile. Just then, a remarkably short man approached to introduce himself. Chunghu seemed to recognize the veiled woman. The two whispered to each other about the man who was currently trying to get close to Jaehwan. Meanwhile, the old man was busy probing Jaehwan, asking about his age. Jaehwan gave an honest answer, saying he was probably around 60. The old man kept digging, asking if he was the son of the previous ruler. But Jaehwan could hear every single thought running through the old man's mind, as well as those of the onlookers nearby. The old man held out his hand and introduced himself as Zhang Inhan, the leader of the Deep Forest Scholars. He mentioned he had heard rumors that Jaehwan was a rather uncooperative fellow. At last, he thought, he would be able to avenge the humiliation he had endured at Gorgon 15 years ago. Back then, he had come begging for permission to set up a branch office in Gorgon, all while bribing the guards at the northern checkpoint. He'd been locked up by Carlton, and then got flat out rejected by the former ruler, but hey, that guy's kicked the bucket now. And Carlton, the guy who locked him up, is currently clinging to life in the hospital. The new ruler is just a wet behind the ears kid, making this a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Jaehwan reached out to shake hands with Jang Irhan. The old geezer took this chance to cast his highest-level illusion skill on him. He saw the gates of hell swing open, and a fire dragon stepping out from within. Everyone around could see that Jaehwan looked a bit off. They all secretly knew that Jang Iran had used his 8 Gates of Hell technique on Jaehwan. The leader of the Disciple Guild smirked, proud of his ultimate illusion technique. He was absolutely sure Jaehwan would be trapped in the illusions of the desolate hell until he lost his mind. He figured the kid would soon be crying and screaming, begging to do whatever he wanted. But Jaehwan's smirk was like a hard slap to Jang Irhan's face. He squeezed the old man's hand. "Well, you guys sure have a unique way of greeting people here. Now, it's my turn to return the favor." Jang Irhan's pupils dilated as he began to tremble. Jaehwan unleashed his soul shatter on him, making the old man see himself trapped in hell. Jang Irhan practically wet his pants, his face turning pale blue as he collapsed to his knees, unable to stand. The surrounding crowd broke into another round of hushed whispers. Jaehwan calmly delivered his judgment. Since Jang Irhan insulted the ruler, he normally should have beaten him to teach everyone a lesson, but this time, he would show mercy and spare the old man's life. But there won't be a next time. Chung-hoo scoffed. "Is the show over already? How boring." Next on the agenda was Jaehwan's inauguration speech, and for some reason, Chung-hoo had a bad feeling about this, and he was absolutely right. Jaehwan boldly declared, "I don't give a damn who Emil Groshek is, what he did, what his life was like, or what kind of ruler he used to be. To put it bluntly, I don't care at all. I know you guys aren't happy with me. You probably think I'm just some kid with mediocre spirit power who only became the ruler out of sheer luck. While that might be true to some extent, I really had no intention of doing this. Becoming the ruler was completely unexpected. Since you all dislike me, and I don't even want this position, how on earth is this going to end well?" After thinking it over for about 30 seconds, he came up with a solution. He announced that anyone who could beat him in a one-on-one match would become the new ruler. Hearing this, the crowd was completely stunned at first. A moment later, someone took the lead, slamming the table and laughing out loud. It was Cayman, the leader of the South Sea Guild. He asked Jaehwan if there were any other conditions. Jaehwan added that there would be a 1-month time limit, and anyone who challenged him and lost would have to join the Abyss Expedition team, which was set to depart in 2 months. Everyone was utterly shocked to hear this, but Jiran had absolute faith in Jaehwan. He had protected Gorgon from their enemies, and he was the one recognized by the former lord. Even when he made ridiculous statements about destruction or even unifying chaos. Even though Jaehwan's speech felt a little off to everyone, Jiran still decided to wait and see what he would do. He believed that Jaehwan wouldn't do anything without a good reason. While Jiran had faith, the reality was harsh. Early the next morning, Yahur barged into Jiran's room to break the terrible news. He rushed over to Jaehwan's room, looking ready to kill, wanting to know how much unfinished business the kid had piled up. But the guy he was looking for was nowhere to be found. Instead, there was only Carlton, who was still covered in injuries, sitting there processing the documents. Jiran was absolutely furious. Where on earth did Jaehwan sneak off to this time? At that moment, Jaehwan and Chung-hoo were down in the basement, smashing statues. Having just come up with a new technique, Jaehwan got into stance to show it off to Chung-hoo. Chung-hoo praised his stance, admitting it looked much sharper than usual. Judging by the movement of his sword, Chung-hoo guessed the kid had been influenced by his own swordplay. He suggested a really cool name, Pierce. But Jaehwan just gave him a look of pure disgust. Chung-hoo threw a fit, shouting that he'd had absolutely enough. How could a legendary divine doctor like him be ordered around by an arrogant punk like Jaehwan? Ignoring him completely, Jaehwan thrust his sword straight at Chung-hoo, forcing the old man to frantically dodge. He kept cursing at Jaehwan for having absolutely no respect for his elders. Jaehwan's strike grazed the old man and slammed right into the wall behind them. With a loud thud, someone tumbled out from behind the wall. It was Yong-yun, the leader of the Thunder God Guild. He was completely knocked out, having absolutely no idea what had just happened when the leader of the Thunder God acts like a search dog, sniffing around to find Jaehwan. His dog-like instincts led him straight down to this basement. Yong-yun came here wanting to solo Jaehwan to claim the top spot, completely ignoring everyone who called his actions cowardly. But he couldn't care less. To Yong-yun, an assassination is just like a one-on-one duel. They're all the same, as long as you take down your opponent. Suddenly, Yong-yun feels a massive tremor. Peeking out to sea, he realizes that all the rumors about Jaehwan are completely off. Yong-yun boldly charges out to challenge Jaehwan, fully confident that he will win. Chung Heo sighs. How can a clan leader like Yong Yun stoop to sneaking up on people? Has he no shame? Jaehwan doesn't care in the slightest. He just tells Yong Yun to bring it on. Sparking with lightning like a wild Pikachu, Yong Yun charges forward to attack. He even confidently unleashes his ultimate move, Thunder God Descent, firing a massive ball of electricity straight at Jaehwan. But before he can even do anything, Jaehwan slips behind him and faceplants him into the dirt. After getting his beat down, Yong Yun immediately behaves. He eagerly promises to keep his word to Jaehwan, and from that moment on, he tags along with him. Yong Yun came from one of the 10 great families of the Great Lands, and it took him exactly 100 years to reach this place. To be precise, Yong Yun was a slave to the Jaehwan clan. The comrades who raided the tower with him also became part of this family, spending the rest of their lives together. But one by one, they were either sent off to the battlefield or died as slaves. Just like that, Yong Yun worked for the Jaehwan clan for nearly 100 years, and almost all of his former comrades who became lackeys had kicked the bucket. And yet, Yong Yun miraculously survived. Through the trust he built up over those 100 years, he finally earned the rank of an attendant. However, on the very day he became an attendant, for the first time in his life, Yong Yun decided to defy his fate. He couldn't keep living like this. Yong Yun betrayed the trust he had spent 100 years building up. He successfully stole the Jaehwan family's highly prized secret art and their most advanced skill. What he obtained was the Thunder God art, and the moment Yong Yun acquired it, every cell in his body was purified, allowing him to tap into the absolute full potential of the Thunder God art. And of course, because of that, he was hunted by the Jaehwan family for 25 years, and was eventually decapitated before being summoned to chaos. It was also thanks to the Thunder God art that Yong Yun claimed the number 9 spot among the 10 clans within just 100 years. So Yong Yun just couldn't accept it. How could someone like Jaehwan, who hasn't even lived for 100 years, rule over chaos? Besides, Dr. Chung Heo knew despair better than anyone, thanks to his time in the Abyss expedition. He smiles again, mockingly telling Yong Yun that he should feel lucky. Lucky to have met Jaehwan before finding out what true despair actually feels like. Meanwhile, Jaehwan is still focused on destroying the stone statue. Yong Yun pouts, still looking defiant. Chung Heo patiently explains that a week before Yong Yun arrived, Gorgon was almost completely taken over by the Golden Sky clan. He doesn't know how they managed to get Gorgon's people to join their side, but he has a feeling they've been planning to overthrow Gorgon for a very long time. However, Jaehwan dragged Gorgon back from the brink of collapse and defeated the Poison King inside the former lord's body. Shocked, Yong Yun complains, asking why Chung Heo didn't tell him all this sooner. Chung Heo fires back, blaming Yong Yun for jumping the gun and trying to assassinate him before even listening to an explanation. While they're bickering, someone else arrives. This newcomer is a big, brawny guy. He wants to challenge Jaehwan next, and he's none other than the leader of the Fire King clan, Kung Wang. Along with him is the leader of the South Sea clan, but Kung Wang is going first. Jaehwan rests his sword on his shoulder. He doesn't want to waste time, telling them both to come at him at once. He's busy perfecting his swordsmanship and has no time to mess around. The leader of the Fire King clan sneers as he charges forward, wrapping himself in flames and striking at Jaehwan. But Jaehwan easily sidesteps it, while Chung Heo screams from the sidelines, telling him not to burn the whole place down. Nearby, the two clash swords. The leader of the Fire King clan is still brimming with confidence, whereas Jaehwan remains completely unfazed. He punches the Fire King leader's sword, spins around, and delivers a swift, light thrust. The Fire King leader is sent flying 10 billion meters away, leaving a deep crater in the wall. Up next is the leader of the South Sea clan, cloaked in water and ice, ready to battle Jaehwan. Bored, Jaehwan sighs, thinking, first lightning, then fire, and now water. Is this guy really any stronger than the last one? Jaehwan leaps forward to launch the first strike. The South Sea clan leader calmly blocks it. Jaehwan senses that there's something different about this opponent. He isn't just mindlessly rushing in like the other two, but is actively trying to control his movements. The South Sea clan leader swings his blade downward. Jaehwan jumps up, attacking from above. The South Sea clan leader steps back to dodge, realizing what would happen if that hit actually connected. If that last blow had landed, he would have been ground to absolute dust. The leader of the South Sea sect sheathed his sword before even going all out, willingly conceding defeat. They sat down to discuss the upcoming Abyss expedition. With the 3 defeated losers lumped together, the leader of the Fire King sect aggressively chewed out the guildmaster of the Thunder Saint Guild. He just couldn't accept that Jundong only lost by a hair, while he suffered the absolute worst beating of them all. Jundong acted like he didn't hear a single word, completely ignoring him while casually whistling. Now that they've lost, they have no choice but to behave and join the Abyss expedition. For Kamen, the leader of the South Sea sect, his goal was never to take down Guan, but rather to join the Abyss expedition team. Kamen used to be close friends with the former city lord, but he wasn't allowed to join the previous Abyss expedition because he simply wasn't strong enough. Back then, when all their achievements were snatched away and everyone lost hope, Kamen could only watch as the entire expedition team collapsed. That tragedy happened 900 years ago. Since then, Kamen has trained relentlessly, waiting for this exact moment. And as for the leader of the Fire King sect,